Welcome back, brothers, to Amalur. Tonight we're diving into lore when Angron fought Leman Russ during the Great Crusade. Before we get to the madness, be sure to like and comment any videos or topics you want to see in the future. Be sure to subscribe from the Emperor. I want to thank you guys for the support. Y'all been absolutely killing it. Now, let's get into the video.
Guenna had not fallen. It had been opened. From orbit, the world resembled a butchered organ left beneath a dying sun, its oceans skinned with ash, its continents split by bombardment scars broad enough to swallow cities. Prometheum storms rolled across the upper atmosphere in black coils, lit from within by furnace-orange lightning. Where cloud banks parted, the scars of compliance showed in vast red wounds. Cities had been flattened into molten slag. Manufactoria had been cored and left burning. The great corpse pods of the old Guennan dominion had ruptured in their millions, vomiting pale synthetic bodies across valleys, highways, causeways, and the broken basins of dead seas. They had looked human before the chain axes found them. Split open, they were a mockery. Wet white muscle grown in vat layers. False organs knotted around silver tubing. Pale skulls filled with gelid cogitation matter. Synthetic nerves that kept twitching long after the bolter shells had blown away their faces. Their blood was thin and dark, too cold, too sluggish, pooling in trenches with the real blood of men and transhuman giants, until no eye could tell which was which. That was Guenna now. Not a conquered world, not a compliant world. A slaughterhouse given planetary scale. Landing fields clogged the plains outside Malkoya, if fields they could still be called. The World Eaters had made planetfall there in the first fury of the campaign, striking like thrown chain blades through the Guennan outer bastions. Now their assault zones were graveyards. Spent drop pods lay half-buried in churned corpse mud, their petals open like iron flowers around dead warriors and dead things that had been made to resemble warriors. Thunderhawks sat crippled on cracked landing struts, their hulls blackened by lass fire and their ramps slick with old gore. One Stormbird had ploughed nose first into a mound of broken construct bodies and remained there, engines still coughing smoke, its forward shrine split wide enough to reveal the burned servitors fused into their control cradles. The 12th Legion had won here, in the manner the 12th Legion won. They had broken everything. Malkoya itself rose beyond the plain, a dead city of shattered stacks and torn citadels. Its upper spires had collapsed inward, impaling the lower districts with kilometers of metal and stone. The Guennan rulers had hidden their command vaults beneath those towers, sealed inside layered adamantium and pale amniotic tanks where their artificial soldiery could be birthed, armed, and sent to die. The World Eaters had reached those vaults with melter charges, chain fists, and rage. The tanks had burst. The city had drowned from below in its own unborn defenders. Now the Legion camped in the shadow of what remained. There were no victory banners. There were kill racks. Helms hung from chains, torn synth spines dried on hooks. Weapons were cleaned beside fires fed by coffin splinters and broken vat shells. Warriors in white and blue battle plate sat amid heaps of limbs, scraping their chain axes with strips of flayed artificial skin. The teeth of the weapons were clotted deep. Some still dragged strands of meat with every slow rotation, whining as if eager to bite again. A rampager held his axe across his knees and worked a blade between the teeth, prying loose fragments of skull. His faceplate was gone. So was most of the left side of his mouth. He laughed anyway, wetly, through exposed teeth and the black glimmer of reinforced jawbone. "Still kicking, this one was," he said, tossing a lump of grey matter into the fire. "No courage in it, only mechanism." Across from him, another warrior spat a gobbet of blood onto the dirt. It steamed where it landed. "Mechanism screams well enough." Around them the wounded laughed. Some laughed because they had heard the words. Some because the butcher's nails bit laughter from them as easily as they bit rage. Some laughed with shattered ribs, pushing against the inside of their armor, with their lungs full of blood, with their hands clenched around weapons they could no longer lift. Apothecaries moved among the dead with the reverence of executioners. Their narthesia whined in the smoke. Bone saws screamed. Drill bit extractors punched through breastplates already cracked by war. Progenoid glands were cut from brothers who had died in frenzy, and from brothers whose nails had killed them after the battle, when silence returned, and gave pain room to bloom. One legionary had torn his own helm apart, trying to reach the implants buried behind his eyes. His skull lay open now beneath the apothecary's gauntlet, the cranial bones peeled outward like petals of wet ivory. Primary gland compromised, the apothecary said. The warrior assisting him looked down at the corpse. He took 7 of them before he fell. He bit through his secondary heart before I reached him. Then he died angry. He died wastefully. The assistant considered that, then looked toward the city where the fires were still burning. There is another way to die. The apothecary did not answer. His saw went deeper. A gout of black-red fluid splashed across his forearm, and he turned back to his work, with the patience of a priest carving relics from a saint. Near the cracked remains of a contemptor dreadnought, Tech Marines chanted in Binharik under clouds of incense and engine smoke. Their red armor was smeared nearly black. Servo arms clamped and pulled at the sarcophagus housing, trying to free the ruined warrior entombed within. The dreadnought's left arm had been torn away at the shoulder. Its right fist remained closed around the crushed torso of a Guennan war thing, as if death had not persuaded the ancient within to release his final kill. Machine spirit aggrieved, one Tech Marine grated. Pilot life signs? Pain response only. Then he lives. The sarcophagus emitted a sound through its fractured vox grill. It might have been static. It might have been laughter. It might have been a request for the enemy. The Tech Marine leaned closer. Be still, honored one. Your wrath is recorded. The sound came again, louder. This time there was no mistaking the word beneath the distortion. More. No one in the camp turned at that. It was the prayer of the Legion. More war, more screams, more blood, more motion, because stillness was pain, and pain had to be given shape. Then the murmurs died, not all at once. The World Eaters were not men to fall silent easily. A chain axe coughed. A wounded warrior groaned. Somewhere, a bolter magazine clattered against stone. But the change moved across the camp with the slow certainty of a shadow crossing snow. Angron was walking. He came from the ruins of Malkoya's western gate, where the heaviest resistance had died. He was massive even among his sons, a brutal silhouette against the burning city. His armor was the color of old bone beneath the blood, its bronze and iron plates hacked, dented, and scorched from the campaign's final hours. Chains hung from him, trophies swung from him. The great cables of the nails crawled over his scalp and into the meat of his skull, vanishing beneath scar tissue and iron ports. His skin was a map of old punishment. His eyes were alive with a torment that had no language left but violence. He did not stride like a king inspecting victory. He moved like a wound that had learned to walk. Warriors lowered their eyes as he passed. Some bowed their helms. Some clenched fists to breastplates. Others grinned with split lips, starving for his notice and terrified of receiving it. He was their father. He was their curse. He was the proof that pain could be made holy without ever becoming gentle. They loved him, as beaten hounds loved the hand that broke the leash and pointed them at another throat. A wounded Guennan construct twitched near the path ahead of him. It was half a body, dragged from the ruins by the retreating tides of slaughter. Its lower torso had been blown away. One arm ended in a 3-pronged blade that scraped weakly against the stone. Its face was almost beautiful, with vat-grown features too symmetrical to be human, and eyes like polished glass filled with dimming light. It made a thin clicking sound, not speech, not pain, only the last stutter of its ruined internal mechanisms. Angron stopped. The warriors nearest him froze. The construct twitched again. Angron's face tightened. Not with anger, not with decision, but with irritation. The nails bit. Every flicker of motion was a needle behind the eyes. Every sound was a hook through the nerves. The wounded thing clicked once more. Angron stepped on its head. The skull burst beneath his boot with a wet ceramic crack. Pale gel and dark fluid spread between the broken stones. The blade arm scraped twice, then stopped. The Primarch moved on. No. Proclamation followed. No curse, no lesson. Cruelty from Angron was rarely theatre. It was reflex. It was breath. It was the body answering pain before the soul, if such a thing remained in him, had time to speak. Khan came to meet him near the central fires. He had removed his helm. Blood striped his face and matted his dark hair against his scalp. One eye was swollen nearly shut. His armor bore new gouges, some deep enough to show the underlayer of cabling and black carapace interface. In one hand, he carried a chain axe with fresh teeth. In the other, he did not bow deeply. Too much submission could disgust Angron. Too little could kill a man. Khan had learned that narrow path better than any of his brothers. "Lord," he said. Angron looked at him. The gaze would have broken mortal courage. Khan endured it, though the muscles in his jaw tightened. "Speak. The last Guennan vaults are dead. Their command engines are ash. Resistance in Malkoya has ended." "Ended?" Khan glanced toward the corpse-choked avenues. From somewhere within the city came the distant roar of a chain blade and the answering crack of bolter fire. "Ended as a war," Khan said, "not as sport." Angron's lips drew back from his teeth. It was not quite a smile. "Then leash the dogs who still need feeding. That is being attempted. Attempt harder." Khan accepted the rebuke with a slight dip of his head. Around them, warriors pretended not to listen. Every son of the 12th Legion learned by listening near death. "There is more," Khan said. Angron's shoulders twitched. The nails gave him no patience for more. They gave him no patience for anything that was not impact, blood, or the silence after a kill. Khan lifted the broken slate. Orbital Auspex has detected translation echoes at the system edge. Multiple capital signatures. Imperial pattern. Formation disciplined. No distress codes. No compliance traffic. A world eater nearby barked a laugh. Another stood, fresh blood running down his greave. Others turned from their fires. "Reinforcement?" one asked. Khan did not look at him. "No." Angron stared upward. Above the Prometheum storms, above the corpse smoke, above the blackened sky of Guenna, something had entered real space with the cold arrogance of a predator certain of its kill. The camp's vox towers began to chatter. Servitors clicked through streams of incoming data. Mortal crewmen in ash-stained flak coats ran between relay shrines with parchment strips and brass-coded orders, their faces pale beneath grime. One slipped in the blood and went down hard. No legionary helped him rise. A centurion with both gauntlets painted red strode toward Khan. "How many ships?" "Enough." The centurion grinned. His teeth were filed points behind the split seal of his helm. "Good." Another officer snapped orders across the local vox. Companies to muster points, armor crews to engines, rampagers forward, destroyers hold until directed, no one charges before command. The last sentence earned laughter, not amused laughter, hungry laughter, murderous laughter, the sound of warriors being told to wait while their skulls filled with knives. "No one charges," the officer repeated. A rampager slammed his axe into the ground. "Then command quickly." The nails were waking across the camp. They did not sleep, not truly, but battle had fed them. Silence had starved them. Now the promise of another enemy set them singing behind implanted eyes. Warriors rose from fires. Magazines were slammed into bolters. Chain blades were revved, checked, silenced, then revved again because the sound was a drug. Apothecaries abandoned corpses, not yet harvested. Tech Marines looked up from broken engines and began dragging half-repaired war machines into readiness. Khan felt it passing through the Legion. The sickness, the glory, the doom. 100,000 warriors, more across the campaign zones, each one a blade that hated the sheath. There were orders to give, lines to form, fire corridors to establish, artillery ranges to calculate. There was a way to meet an incoming legion. There was a way to make war as generals made war. His father's sons wanted only the collision. A mortal officer approached, flanked by 2 armsmen. He wore the sigils of the expeditionary fleet. Though the gold braid at his shoulder had been darkened by soot, he stopped too far from Angron for courage and too close for wisdom. "My Lord Primarch," he said, voice cracking despite his effort to master it. "Astropathic relays are receiving identification protocols. The fleet bears the heraldry of the 6th Legion." That name moved differently through the camp, not fear. The World Eaters despised fear, even when it lived in them. It was recognition. The wolves of Fenris, the Emperor's savage hunters, the legion that came when others required chastisement and called its butchery duty. The Centurion spat red into the mud. "Russ!" Angron's hands curled. The servos in his gauntlets whined. For an instant the camp seemed to lean toward him, every warrior waiting to learn the shape of his wrath. Khan watched his father's face. He saw pain first, because pain was always first. Then hatred. Then something colder beneath it, a memory of chains, arenas, high riders, masters speaking of lessons. "The wolf comes to bare his teeth," Khan said. Angron looked at him. "Wolves bare teeth before they die." The sky answered before Kern could. A line of fire pierced the black clouds, then another, then dozens. Descent trails burned through the upper atmosphere as the first gunships and dropcraft punched toward Guenna, not in the reckless scatter of haste, but in measured, disciplined approach vectors. Above them, visible only when lightning lit the cloud sea from beneath, immense shadows crossed the heavens. Warships, Imperial warships, predatory and silent beyond the storm. No bombardment came. That was worse. A fleet arriving to reinforce would hail. A fleet arriving to kill would fire. A fleet arriving in judgment might do neither until its lord had spoken. Across the World Eater's camp, warriors laughed harder. They sharpened blades already sharp enough to split ceramite. They punched fists against breastplates. They called for armor. They called for ammunition. They called for the wolves to land closer. "Let them come," snarled a rampager. "How many?" another demanded of the Vox crews. "How many grey dogs?" "Enough to make a mound," said a third. "Enough to hear them scream?" "Enough." Angron stood beneath the ashfall, looking into the burning sky. Black flakes settled on his bare scalp, catching on the cables of the nails. They hissed where they touched the heat of his armor. He did not blink. His sons watched him watching the heavens, and in their hearts, what remained of them, they mistook his stillness for command. Khan knew better. The nails were hurting him. Waiting hurt him. Silence hurt him. A challenge delayed was agony refined. The main Vox shrine crackled. Static rolled through the camp speakers, low and predatory. Then came a voice, cold enough to cut through fire and butchery and the laughter of the 12th Legion. "Angron of the World Eaters, this is Leman Russ of the Space Wolves. I have come by the will of the Emperor. Stand your legion down and meet me beneath open sky." For a breath, even the wounded stopped laughing. Then Angron smiled. Every chain blade in the camp began to scream. The flagship came out of the warp without triumph. No horns sounded through the ship. No chorus rose from the mortal decks. No heraldic broadcast thundered into the void to announce the coming of the Wolf King. The great warship slid back into real space in cold silence, its running lights hooded, its gun batteries live beneath sealed shutters, its launch bays already crowded with warriors waiting in the iron gloom. Around it, the fleet of the 6th Legion translated in disciplined formation. Battle barges, strike cruisers, escort squadrons, and munition tenders emerged from the Imperium like beasts surfacing beneath black water. Warp frost clung to their hulls in pale veils. Lightning crawled across void shields and died. The ships did not scatter. They did not burn for glory. They formed a killing arc above Guenna and held their teeth behind closed lips. In the strategium of the flagship, the air tasted of iron, incense, and old storm. Rune priests stood in a half-circle beneath hanging chains of bone and bronze. Their armor was frost grey, marked with runes daubed in dark red. Their eyes were open, but they were not looking at the chamber. They tasted the last foulness of the warp, still bleeding from the translation wake. They listened to the anger of Guenna below, to the death echoes rising from a world that had been conquered without being spared. One of them spat blood onto the deck. "The world screams," he said. A Jarl beside him gave a low snort. "Worlds scream. It is their habit when legions come. This one screams from beneath its own skin." No one laughed. The hololithic projection of Guenna turned above the central table. It was not clean cartography. It was a wound rendered in light. Continents glowed with bombardment scars. Malkoia burned like a coal lodged in the planet's side. Corpse density warnings pulsed in crimson across the plains. Mechanicum notation streamed beside thermal blooms, wreck fields, atmospheric poison data, voidcraft debris, and the identification markers of the 12th Legion spread in ugly concentrations around the dead city. Leman Russ studied it all. He wore no helm. His pale hair fell around a face made for sagas and executions. Furs hung over his warplate. Runes had been carved into the metal and darkened with old pigment. A blade rested near him, silent in its scabbard, and his hand did not touch it. He looked every inch the barbarian the other Primarchs accused him of being. Wolf pelts, braids, fangs, scars. The cold eyes of Fenris under a warrior's brow. But his mind was clear. He read the Picts the way a hunter read broken snow. There, the churned approaches where the World Eaters had charged too often and repaired too little. There, the collapsed Gennan causeways that would funnel armor into narrow lanes. There, the mounds of the dead that would slow infantry but shield advancing packs from direct fire. There, the ruined evacuation spines jutting from Malkoia's corpse districts, tall enough to mask drop approach. There, the 12th Legion's armor in disorder around the western killing grounds, Spartans and land raiders stationed for refit rather than counterattack. There, the strongest concentration of chain-axe infantry, gathered not where a commander would place them, but where there had been the most blood. Russ breathed in through his nose, slow and cold. They have made a midden of it. Jarl Ogvai Helmshrot stood to his left, arms folded across his breastplate. Other Jarls gathered near, broad as murder, each one a king of killers beneath the greater king. Thanes waited behind them. Huskarls stood along the chamber walls with bolters mag locked to their thighs and axes hanging ready. "They broke resistance," one Jarl said. "They broke everything," Russ answered. There was no pity in his voice. The wolves had burned worlds. They had ended bloodlines, erased warlords, cracked fortress moons, and dragged compliance from the mouths of kings. They were not gentle men looking down upon barbarism. They were executioners, offended by a butcher who dulled the axe on bone and called the ruin craft. Russ pointed to the red-gold markers around Malkoia. "The 12th holds no line. They brood around the kill. Their armor crews are late to readiness. Their forward companies are not deployed for defense. They are waiting for provocation." "They will have it," said a Jarl with a beard bound in iron rings. Russ glanced at him. The Jarl lowered his chin, not in apology, in acknowledgement. "They will have what I give them," Russ said. "No more." The hololith shifted, expanding the plains west of the dead city. Pick feed from high-orbit augers sharpened into a broken wasteland. Drop pods lay open like torn teeth. The carcasses of aircraft stained the ground in black fans. Corpse pods burst across trenches. Fires burned in pools of spilled promethium. Among it all moved the World Eaters, white armor darkened with blood, their formations loose, their weapons too often in hand. One of the rune priests whispered a charm under his breath. "Speak it plain," Russ said without looking away. "The Red Angel is below." Every warrior in the Strategium knew it. Still, the words changed the air. Russ's mouth tightened. "Aye? Will he listen?" asked Ogvai. Russ looked at the burning symbol that marked Angron's last confirmed position outside Malkoya's western gate. The projection painted the Red Angel as a sigil, neat and bloodless. It lied by existing. "He will hear me," Russ said. "Whether he understands is another matter." No one answered. There were some truths even wolves did not bark at. Russ turned from the hololith. "This is not a cull unless he makes it one. I will not draw first blood between legions for the joy of it. Angron is to be brought to heel if he can still feel the hand upon his collar. If he cannot, he is to be shown what he is." "And if he will not be shown?" another Jarl asked. Russ's eyes moved to him. "Then we learn whether he can die." The words fell without heat. That was what made them terrible. A mortal officer in Blackfleet uniform stepped forward and pressed a fist to his chest. "Lord, gun decks report readiness. Lance batteries are loaded. Macro broadsides await your word. Torpedo crews are at firing posture. No orbital fire unless ordered by my voice." The officer bowed and withdrew quickly, as if proximity to the Primarch had shortened his life by moments. Russ faced his Jarls again. He must see the shape of it from the ground. If I scour him from orbit, he learns nothing. If I meet him with the whole legion in a frontal charge, he learns the wrong thing. The Red Angel understands only the pit, so we will give him one and close the gates around it. The hololith obeyed his gesture. Rings appeared across the corpse plains. "Outer containment," Russ said. A wide circle of grey runes formed beyond the World Eater's camp, placed behind wreck fields and along the broken approaches to Malkoya. "No company of the 12th leaves the field intact if I give the word. Armor packs here, here, and here. Sicaran squadrons hull down behind the corpse ridges. Missile batteries dug into the refinery bones. Heavy bolters on the eastern spine. They will think these are distant observers until the jaws shut." Another gesture. A tighter ring appeared. Midfield pressure. Grey Slayers in staggered packs. They will yield ground by my mark, not by fear. They are to bleed the charge and draw it inward. No oath charges, no hero work. Any warrior who breaks formation for glory will answer to me if he survives. That drew harsh smiles. A third ring burned into being. Inner cordon, Varigir and Contemptors, shield locked, axes low, guns hungry. This ring does not close until Angron is committed. The last markers appeared as pale runes hidden beneath the projection, buried in corpse fog and wrecked towers. "Reserve? Deathsworn," Russ said, "and the packs I do not expect to bring home." The chamber was silent for a moment. There it was, the cruelty of the Wolf King, laid naked on the table with the precision of a blade. Not frothing rage, not the joy of the kill. Calculation, the willingness to spend his own sons where the spending would purchase truth. Ogvai looked at the markers. "You have placed Red Snowpack in the first breach line." "I have. They will be overrun." "They know. Blackmore Pack beside them?" "They asked for the place of biting. They will die there." "Likely." Ogvai's eyes did not soften. No Fenrisian Jarl insulted the dead before they had earned the name. Then their names will be long in the fire halls. Russ did not look away from the map. Names do not close a trap. Discipline does. Beneath the Strategium, the ship prepared for murder. In the launch bays, Grey Slayers stood in ranks beneath chains swinging from the ceiling. Their frost-grey plate was marked with pack signs, old wounds, and kill runes. Bolters were checked and checked again. Combat blades were kissed against helm brows. Axes were locked to mag clamps. Some wore pelts over one shoulder. Some carried shields scarred by wars whose names had already become saga. The Varagir waited apart in Terminator plate, massive and still as mountain stones. Their shields were slab-thick, their axes powered but not yet howling. Amber lenses burned beneath wolf-skull helms. They did not speak. They did not need to. Their silence had more weight than a mortal regiment's war cry. The death-sworn stood in blackened plate marked for doom. Their faces were hidden. Their oaths had already been spoken. Around them, serfs worked quickly and looked nowhere too long. A man could feel death gather around those warriors like winter fog. Contemptor dreadnoughts hung in drop cradles, their sarcophagi sealed behind rune-etched armor. One ancient beat a fist, once against the restraint clamp, slow and deliberate. The sound passed through the deck like a heart striking iron. "Soon, old one," murmured an iron priest. Spartan assault carriers waited in their bays with engines, growling. Land raiders were chained for descent. Sicaran battle tanks sat with accelerator auto cannons locked forward, machine spirits restless beneath layers of prayer. Heavy bolter packs received ammunition belts thick as a mortal's arm. Volkite culverins were carried to waiting hands. Missile racks were blessed in oils and marked for range. Every weapon had a place in the hunt. Every warrior had been told where his blood might fall. The wolves did not cheer. They prepared. Back in the Strategium, Russ watched the first drop icons blink readiness. "The 12th will laugh when they see us land outside their reach," said a Jarl. "They will think it caution." It is insult. It is both. That earned a low growl of approval. Russ leaned over the table. The dead city turned beneath him, and for a moment the Primarch looked less like a king than a beast scenting the wind through a crack in the world. "Set us down beyond their immediate charge, close enough that Angron sees me, far enough that his sons must wait to kill. Waiting is a hook in their skulls. We will hang the lesson from it." The rune priest, who had tasted blood in the warp, lifted his head. "The omens are red." Russ looked at him with winter in his eyes. "They usually are. Brother will stand against brother. Aye, that is an ill saga. All true sagas are." The order went out. The fleet remained dark above Guenna, but its belly opened. Gunships and dropcraft fell from the ships in precise waves, descending through the poisoned clouds on columns of restrained fire. The atmosphere clawed at their hulls. Ash battered their vision slits. Prometheum lightning flashed close enough to paint their undersides in hellish orange. They did not scatter. They fell as packs fall upon prey, separate bodies sharing one intent. Below, Malkoia burned. The World Eater's camp stirred like a wound full of blades. The first Space Wolf craft touched down beyond the western corpse plain. Ramps slammed open. Grey Slayers moved into the ash without haste. Heavy weapons teams took ground among the skeletal ruins of Guenna harvest towers. Sicaran tanks rolled from landers and settled behind ridge lines of broken vat flesh. Land raiders growled into position. Spartan carriers disgorged warriors whose boots sank ankle-deep into mud made from blood, ash, and synthetic meat. They did not advance into the World Eater's teeth. They made the World Eaters look at them. That was enough. Russ descended last. His Stormbird settled upon a rise of shattered black stone overlooking the plain. Its engines beat corpse fog into spirals around the landing claws. The ramp opened with a hydraulic groan. Cold air met furnace wind. Ash swept inward and dusted the deck around the Wolf King's boots. Ogvai stood behind him. "Lord, your guard." No. The Jarl's expression did not change, but the word displeased him. Angron will not come alone in spirit, even if he walks alone in flesh. Neither will I. Russ stepped down the ramp. He carried his helm beneath one arm. His blade hung at his side. He did not hurry. Behind him, the visible lines of the 6th Legion remained still, austere and grey beneath the black sky. Before him, across the corpse field, the World Eaters howled and revved their chain axes until the air itself seemed to tear. Russ walked alone toward the place of parley. In the corpse fog to his left, grey slayers moved without sound between broken pods and dead machine men. To his right, Varagir shapes vanished behind the ribs of a collapsed hab-spine. Farther out, where the ash fell thick enough to blind mortal eyes, the Death-Sworn began their silent advance. The Wolf King did not look back. The howl that answered Russ did not rise from throats alone. It came from chain blades dragged into life. It came from bolt mechanisms slamming home. It came from wounded warriors beating broken fists against their own breastplates until ceramite rang like funeral iron. It came from the deep places behind the eyes, where the butcher's nails sat in their sockets of stolen bone and sang their cruel hymns into the meat of the brain. Waiting had been a wound. Russ had opened it. The World Eaters moved, not as the parade legions moved, with polished heraldry and command banners advancing in geometric pride, not as the sons of Leman, in perfect ranks and perfect obedience, not as the warriors of Dawn, each warrior a stone in a wall. The 12th Legion gathered like blood finding a slope. It ran toward violence by nature, by pain, by doctrine, by the inherited memory of arenas beneath alien suns. Centurions roared company orders through vox grills already cracked from shouting. Standard bearers drove poles into the corpse mud and dragged them free again when their formations surged too far ahead. Sergeants smashed gauntlets into helms to force warriors back into ranks. Some obeyed, some did not. Some obeyed for the length of a breath, then began pacing like caged beasts, chain axes revving low in their fists. "Line them!" a captain bellowed, his voice raw with command strain. "By company marks, by assault designation, despoilers to the fore when ordered, not before." A despoiler in white plate, daubed red across both gauntlets, turned his helm. "When ordered" is coward speech. The captain crossed the distance in 3 strides and drove his fist into the warrior's faceplate hard enough to dent the cheek guard inward. "When ordered" is legion speech. The despoiler swayed. For a heartbeat, every warrior near them waited to see if discipline would hold, or if blood would answer blood. Then the struck warrior laughed. It was wet, grateful almost. "Then speak faster, Captain." All around them, the culture of the nails performed its rites without priest or scripture. A warrior knelt beside a dead brother and drew a combat blade down his own vambrace, scoring a new kill mark into the paint. Another pressed his bare palm into a basin of blood gathered from the field, then smeared it over his helm in a red handprint. 2 rampagers stood face to face and exchanged oath scars, each cutting the other across the cheek with the same jagged blade, not flinching as the edge opened flesh to the gums. Others chained trophies to their pauldrons: Guenna's skull plates, broken machine spines, severed hands that twitched even after death, strips of pale synth flesh drying into parchment. No one called it worship, not yet. But every gesture had the weight of offering. Every blade washed in blood seemed consecrated. Every laugh at pain was a creed. The Legion had taken the nails into its skulls, but the nails had taken the Legion into themselves. They were no longer merely implants hammered into unwilling flesh. They were custom, language, law. A warrior who endured stillness without anger was suspect. A warrior who spoke of restraint without spitting was despised. A warrior who returned from slaughter clean was either a coward or a liar. The wounded were dragged from the fires and assessed with brutal speed. An apothecary in bone-white plate knelt over a legionary whose abdomen had been opened from hip to sternum. The warrior was still alive, though his hands had been nailed to the ground by fragments of rebar to stop him tearing at the wound. His intestines glistened across his lap in loops of purple and red. His helm had been removed. His teeth were clenched so hard several had cracked. "Can he stand?" asked a sergeant. The apothecary glanced at the ruin of the warrior's body. "No." "Can he hold a bolter?" "No." "Can he bite?" The dying warrior laughed through blood foam. "Bring me close enough." The apothecary ignored the humor. His narthecium extended with a surgical click. "Secondary progenoid viable." The dying warrior's eyes rolled toward him. "Take it, then." "I had already decided." The drill punched through the ruined chest. The legionary arched, tendons standing out in his neck like cables. He did not scream. Screaming was for fear, and there was no fear here, not where his brothers could hear it. He bit through his lower lip instead, spraying blood over his chin. When the apothecary withdrew the glistening gland, the warrior gave a bubbling growl of approval. "Good," he rasped. "Make another bastard." The apothecary sealed the gene seed container and moved to the next body before the warrior finished dying. This, too, was how the Legion preserved itself. Not with tenderness, not with lamentation, with knives, with saws, with the theft of future life from the edge of present death. Beyond the medical fires, the order of battle formed in fits and surges. Rampager squads gathered nearest the forward approaches, their armor heavy with chains, hooks, and trophy weights. Many carried paired chain axes. Others bore meteor hammers, barbed flails, and brutal close assault weapons too ugly for any ceremonial rack. They shoved one another, laughing, snarling, challenging, the nails turning anticipation into a shared fever. Behind them, despoiler companies assembled with bolt pistols and chain blades, boarding shields, breacher tools, and axes that had carved Guenna vault doors as readily as living torsos. Their sergeants walked the lines, checking magazines, slamming helm seals closed, tearing away damaged armor plates where they hindered motion. Farther back, destroyer cadres stood apart. Even the other world eaters gave them distance. Their armor bore chemical scoring and rad burns. Phosphex canisters hung from reinforced harnesses. Rad grenades, alchemical projectors, and forbidden munitions rested in their weapon racks beneath the watch of tech marines, whose voices clicked with restrained disapproval. The destroyers did not laugh as much as their brothers. Perhaps they had breathed too many dead worlds. Perhaps they already knew that some weapons killed beyond rage and left nothing worth butchering. The dreadnoughts were awakened in their drop shrines and armor pits. Contemptors stamped through the corpse mud, sarcophagus lenses burning hot. One dragged a chain fist through a mound of Guenna dead, carving a trench of twitching meat simply because the resistance of flesh pleased the ancient inside. A Leviathan dreadnought stood like a walking siege altar near the broken shell of a manufactorum, its siege claw opening and closing with hydraulic hunger. Its hull was painted in old white and blue beneath layers of grime, every inch marked by battle damage, kill scripture, and impact scars. The warrior entombed within spoke over external vox, in a voice like stones being ground beneath tank treads. "Point me," it growled. "I hear wolves." Spartan assault tanks woke with engine roars that shook ash from the wreckage. Land raiders reversed out of corpse pits, treads grinding bone and vat shell beneath them. Mortal crew thralls ran ammunition in chains from supply hulks to armor bays, their faces locked in the blank obedience of men who knew that panic near the 12th Legion was a form of suicide. Overhead, drop elements reported readiness from low orbit and atmospheric holding patterns, their pilots asking for descent vectors and receiving only snarled replies from officers trying to build a war plan from a legion that wanted only a charge. Khan moved through it all with Gorechild resting against his shoulder. The chain axe was quiet for now. He could feel its weight as an anchor against the rising fever. His own nails ticked behind his eyes, each pulse a hot needle, each moment of restraint a debt that violence would later collect with interest. He understood the hunger around him. He shared it. That was why he could distrust it. He climbed the fractured side of a Guenna command crawler and looked across the field. The wolves had landed in insultingly careful measure, not close, not far. Close enough to be seen, far enough that a blind charge would cross broken ground beneath enemy fire. Their grey lines stood amid corpse fog and shattered podfields. Too much spacing, too many empty lanes, too much patience. Armour where armour should not be if it intended immediate advance. Infantry where infantry would draw pursuit. Heavy weapons concealed badly enough to be noticed by a warrior meant to notice them, which meant there would be others concealed better. Khan narrowed his eyes. Hunters, then. Russ had not come merely to bare fangs. He had come with a lesson already laid into the dirt. A warrior climbed after him, helm tucked beneath one arm. Blood had dried in black sheets down the side of his face. "Why do they wait?" the warrior asked. Khan did not look away from the field. "Because they wish us to move first," the warrior laughed. "Then they are wise. We are good at moving first. They are placed to receive a charge. Then we will break them. Perhaps." The warrior turned toward him. "Perhaps?" Khan looked at him then, and the laughter died on the other warrior's lips. "Yes, perhaps." Below, Angron stood at the center of the camp, surrounded by officers who would rather have faced artillery than counsel him. The Primarch's hands flexed open and closed. Blood had dried across his arms in cracked bands. His bare head twitched with each pulse of the nails. The cables, buried in his skull, seemed alive beneath the falling ash. A hololithic field map flickered before him, projected from a damaged command unit. Red markers showed the Legion's companies. Grey markers showed the wolves. The machine struggled with atmospheric interference, turning the image into a storm of light and static. A centurion pointed with a bloodied gauntlet. "Lord, the 6th has deployed in depth. Their center appears thin, but the flanks are too quiet. If we draw them inward, then press here and here with armor, we may force them to commit their reserves before you engage Russ." Angron stared at the map as if it had insulted him by existing. Another officer tried. Brave or doomed, perhaps both. "We should not give them the clean charge they seek to shape. Let the destroyers soften their midline. Send armor through the southern corpse ridges. Hold the rampagers until their shield wall fractures." The Primarch's jaw worked. The officers fell silent. The nails punished thought. Khan could see it. Every second of counsel was a hook dragged through Angron's skull. Every proposed delay was the voice of a master telling a slave to kneel. Strategy, to Angron, was too often a palace word, a king's word, a word spoken by those who watched others die from balconies. Angron raised one hand. The command unit shattered beneath his fist. The hololithic map burst into sparks and died. "Maps are for kings," he said. No one breathed. "I was made in pits. Point me at the throat." A murmur rolled through the gathered world eaters, low and savage and reverent. That was the father they understood. Not the general bending over a slate. Not the prince counting angles. The gladiator with the world reduced to one truth. There was an enemy. There was distance. Distance existed to be murdered. Khan came down from the crawler and approached. Warriors stepped aside for him, though not easily. No world eater liked yielding ground. "Father," he said. Angron turned. The word was dangerous. Sometimes it reached what remained beneath the nails. Sometimes it struck only pain. Khan continued. "Russ has not come as a fool. His lines are placed too cleanly. He wants you forward. He wants us stretched." Angron's eyes fixed on him. You sound like them. No. You sound like every high rider who ever spoke of patience while slaves bled below. Khan felt the accusation like a blade placed against the throat. He did not deny it too quickly. That would be fear. He did not accept it. That would be death. I speak as your son, he said, and as one who would see wolves dead without giving them the manner of our killing. Angron stepped closer. The air around him seemed to thicken with heat and blood stink. Do you think I fear Russ? No. Do you think his little lesson matters? I think he believes it does. Angron's smile was a broken thing. Then I will break that belief in his mouth. The officers heard only certainty. The warriors nearest them began hammering weapons against armor again. Karn heard something else beneath it, not doubt. Angron did not doubt, but recognition. Russ had spoken from orbit with the voice of judgment, and Angron had known that voice in countless forms. Masters always came with lessons. Masters always named their chains duty, law, wisdom, compliance. The Red Angel would meet this one in the open and answer him with blood. Prepare the forward companies, Angron said. The command officers moved at once, relieved to have an order shaped like violence. Rampagers to first assault posture. Despoilers behind the Primarchs advance. Spartans ready to breach. Land raiders to engine heat. Destroyers awaiting sanction. Dreadnought talons forward by command. The Legion responded as if a blade had finally left the scabbard. The disorder did not vanish, but it became momentum. Warriors shoved into packs. Chains tightened around wrists and weapon grips. Helms were locked. Vox channels filled with growls, laughter, target oaths, and the ceaseless whisper of men speaking to their own pain as if it were a brother standing beside them. Khan watched Angron turn toward his armor-bearers. The weapon lay upon a slab of broken Guenna stone. Widowmaker. It was less a chain axe than an execution engine given a haft. Massive, brutal, its teeth broad and cruel, its casing scarred by wars from the earliest blooding of the Legion's rebirth. Dried gore darkened the lower housing. Strips of flesh clung in old seams, despite repeated cleaning. The weapon seemed to resent stillness as much as the warriors around it. Two serfs had carried it to the slab. Both kept their eyes down. One trembled. The other had enough sense not to. Angron reached for it. His fingers closed around the haft. The chain axe came alive with a scream that cut through the camp, through the laughter, through the vox, through the groan of engines and the chanting of tech marines. It was the sound of restraint ending. Across the corpse plain, the wolves waited in silence. Angron lifted Widowmaker and began walking toward Russ. The plain between the legions had once been a processional road. Its stones were still there beneath the dead, though only in patches where shellfire had scraped the ground clean, or tank treads had ground bodies into paste thin enough to reveal the old black surface beneath. The Guennans had built the road wide enough for triumphal engines and corpse pod carriers, flanked by statues of their vat-born kings, each face serene, each hand raised in benediction over a people that had not truly been born. Now the statues lay broken and half buried in meat. One stone head, large as a bunker, stared eyeless toward the sky, while blood rain gathered in the carved hollows of its cheeks. Malkoya burned behind Angron. Corpse fog crawled low across the killing field, dragging ash and chemical vapor around the ankles of the dead. It moved in slow folds, stirred by distant engine thunder, by the heat sighing from shattered armor, by the breath of war machines waiting beyond sight. Chain blades growled from the World Eater's line in irregular pulses, each brief snarl answered by another farther down the formation. From the wolves came almost nothing: the scrape of a boot, the click of a maglock, the faint murmur of packvox hidden behind sealed helms. Neither Primarch brought an honor guard into the center. Neither came alone. Behind Angron, the sons of the 12th Legion stood in loose, hungry masses, white and blue armor almost black beneath drying blood. Rampagers leaned forward as if against chains no eye could see. Despoilers flexed gauntlets around axe hafts. Destroyers stood apart in their stained plate, their forbidden weapons hanging heavy and silent. Dreadnought silhouettes loomed through the smoke behind them, like walking tombs that had learned impatience. Tank engines growled and idled, caged thunder inside iron hulls. Behind Russ, the 6th Legion waited in depth. Grey slayers in frost-grey plate held their lines among the corpse mounds and broken pods. Varriger shapes stood farther back, broad shields low, powered axes quiet. Heavy weapon packs watched from ruins with the patience of wolves under snow. Sicaran engines purred beneath cover. Land raiders sat hull down behind ridges of shattered synth flesh. The visible line was only the teeth. The jaws were elsewhere. Angron walked as if the ground had offended him by lying between himself and the enemy. Widowmaker rested in his right hand, its teeth idle but wet, its brutal head low enough to drag a red furrow through the corpse sludge. He wore no helm. Ash clung to the cables of the butcher's nails and melted against the heat of his scalp. Every few steps, the muscles in his jaw spasmed. Every few breaths, one shoulder twitched as though an unseen lash had struck him. He was enormous, scarred and terrible. Not a king coming to speak, not a general coming to bargain, but a storm forced briefly into the shape of a man. Russ came from the opposite side, with his helm beneath one arm and his blade at his hip. Furs moved in the wind around him. Rune marks darkened his armor. His hair was pale in the gloom, his face hard as winter stone. He looked savage enough to satisfy any fool who mistook trophies for thought. The beast was there, yes. It lived in the set of his shoulders, in the old blood on his gauntlets, in the way his eyes did not flinch from Angron's ruin. But it was leashed, held, a violence clenched in a fist, waiting for the right instant to open. The distance closed. The legions watched. A dead Guenna construct twitched between the Primarchs, one hand opening and closing in the mud as broken internal motors fought death. Russ stepped around it. Angron stepped through it, crushing the pale wrist beneath his boot, without looking down. They stopped, within striking distance. For a moment, the only sound was the breathing of monsters. Russ looked past Angron at the corpse fields, the ruptured tanks, the mountains of artificial dead, the legionaries laughing through pain at the edge of the World Eater's line. "You have made your compliance plain," Russ said. Angron's lips peeled back. "Then you can read. I can read a ruin. You came across the void to inspect rubble? I came because this was not war. This was waste." Behind Angron, a growl moved through the World Eaters. The sound rose and died in the same breath, strangled by officers who knew how quickly insult could become battle. Khan stood near the foremost ranks, helm in place now, Gorechild held still in his hands. He watched the wolves as much as he watched the Primarchs. Russ continued, his voice carrying without strain. "Worlds are brought to compliance so mankind may endure. Cities are broken when they must be broken. Kings are killed when they must be killed. Armies are destroyed when they stand in defiance. This..." He turned his head slightly, taking in the plain. "This is a blade hacked into a corpse until the edge is ruined." Angron stared at him. The nails ticked behind his eyes. Khan could see the pain move across his father's face, a shadow under the skin. Russ's words were not loud, and that made them worse. They did not offer the clean insult of a challenge. They carried judgment. Worse, they carried the voice of someone who believed he had the right to deliver it. "Do not speak to me of endurance," Angron said. "Do not speak to me of mankind. Your Imperium chains worlds with gold and calls the links salvation. Your Emperor names himself Father and sends sons to kneel." Russ's gaze sharpened. "Our Father sent us to unite a species that would have died screaming in the dark. Our Father stole armies, stole worlds, stole children from the mud, then called the theft destiny. A flicker passed through Russ's eyes. Not doubt, something colder. Recognition, perhaps, of a wound he had not come to heal. "You speak as if you stand outside it," Russ said. "Yet here you are, wearing his war plate, leading his legion, killing beneath his banner." Angron's grip tightened on Widowmaker. The chain axe casing creaked under his hand. "I kill, because killing is the only honest thing your empire asks of us." Russ stepped closer. Not enough to provoke the swing, enough to make every warrior watching feel the air tighten. "No, you kill because it is easier than command." The World Eater's line rippled. A rampager took a step forward. His sergeant caught him by the pauldron. The rampager turned with a snarl, and the sergeant headbutted him hard enough to crack both helms together. They stayed locked there, shaking with the effort not to begin. Across the field, space wolf gauntlets closed around bolter grips and axe hafts. No one advanced, no one spoke. The wolves waited for their king's signal or the enemy's mistake. Their stillness was an insult all its own. Angron laughed. It was not amusement. It was a sound dragged over broken glass. "Command," he said. "Shape, restraint, little words for little kings." "Primarchs were made to lead armies," Russ said, "to shape war, to spend lives with purpose, to know when a battle is won and when slaughter has become indulgence." Indulgence. Angron spat the word into the mud. "You think this is pleasure?" he asked. For the first time, something lucid burned clean through the rage. It was awful, because it was almost calm. "You look at me and think I chose a throne of skulls because it pleased me. You think I wake without pain. You think silence is peace. You think restraint is strength, because you were raised by beasts and still learn to like the leash when a golden master held it." Russ's expression did not change. Angron leaned toward him. The nails' cables trembled against his skull. "I know chains, Wolf. I know them better than you know your own name. I know the weight of iron on wrists. I know the sound a crowd makes when it wants your blood but not your death, because death ends the sport too soon. I know masters. I know lessons. I know every soft word tyrants use before they close the collar." Russ did not answer at once. The corpse fog slid between them. "Somewhere in the World Eater's line," a warrior began whispering through clenched teeth. The words were not prayer. They were numbers, perhaps, or names, or merely a rhythm against the nails. Another laughed too loudly. Another revved his chain axe, until an officer snarled for silence. Russ looked at the 12th Legion. "They follow you into ruin. They follow me because they are mine. They die because you cannot master yourself." That struck harder than any blade. The sound from the World Eaters became a roar, and this time it did not die quickly. Weapons rose. Bolt pistols angled upward. Chain axes screamed to life in 100 hands. Officers cursed and shoved warriors back by force. Khan lifted one hand, palm closed, not pleading for calm, but commanding readiness. His own nails were fire. He wanted to cross the field. He wanted to bury Gorechild in the nearest grey helm. He wanted, with perfect sincerity, to do exactly what Russ expected them to do. Angron's face went still. That was worse than rage. "You speak of my sons?" "I do. They die as warriors. They die as extensions of your wound." Widowmaker's teeth began to turn, slow at first, each tooth catching light from Malkoya's fires. Russ's voice lowered, but every word carried. "They are not an army when you lead them so. They are a scream with armor. They are a weapon that cannot be sheathed. That makes you dangerous. It does not make you strong." Angron's smile returned, thin and bloody. "And you, Russ? What are you? A king, a brother, an executioner?" He tilted his head, and the nails tugged one side of his face into a twitch. "No. You are a dog taught to call obedience wisdom. You heal when commanded. You bare teeth when commanded. You kill when commanded. Then you come here to tell me I am the slave." Several space wolves growled aloud. Russ raised his hand slightly. The sound ceased. Angron saw it. Everyone saw it. His laugh came again, harsher now. "Look at them. Good dogs. Well trained. Does the Emperor scratch your throat when you bring him a world?" Russ's eyes went colder than the void. "The difference between us is not obedience," he said. "It is purpose." "No," Angron said. "The difference is that you kiss the hand holding the chain." A space wolf somewhere in the forward line snarled a Fenrisian curse. A world eater answered with a laugh and a gesture with his chain axe. The gap between the legions seemed to shrink, though no one had crossed it. Corpse fog parted around boots edging forward. Armor servos whined. Targeting lenses glowed red and amber behind helm slits. Khan's Vox clicked with overlapping voices. Forward assault asking leave. Dreadnought Talon primed. Rampagers will not hold. Say again, rampagers will not hold. He did not answer. His eyes were on the wolves' flanks. Too still, too wide. Too many empty spaces where warriors should have been visible if the line were as thin as it appeared. Russ had come to speak, yes, but the field had been written before a word was said. "Father," Khan voxed on a private channel. Angron did not look back. "Father, the field is wrong." Russ heard nothing of the vox, but his eyes flicked once toward Kern, as if he knew exactly what was being said. That single glance almost began the war. A world eater in the front rank surged another step. A space wolf opposite him raised his bolter a fraction, not to aim, not quite, perhaps only to adjust weight, perhaps to threaten, perhaps because his finger had tightened in anger. Another world eater barked a challenge. A wolf laughed, low and contemptuous. A bolt pistol came up among the white and blue. A grey-armoured warrior shifted his stance. No one later would agree on the first shot. Some would swear a space wolf fired from the ruins, trying to murder a son of Angron under parley. Others would swear a world eater's nails broke his restraint, and he loosed the first round with a laugh. Some heard only the sound and invented loyalty around it afterward. Some saw a muzzle flash and named it enemy, because that was simpler than shame. In that moment, there was only a crack of ignition. A bolt round crossed the dead air. It struck a helm in the forward press and detonated inside the faceplate. The warrior's head burst in a spray of ceramite shards, bone fragments, black carapace plugs, and wet red matter. The body remained standing for a heartbeat, fingers spasming around its weapon, then collapsed into the mud between the lines. Silence held just long enough to become memory. Then the 12th Legion lost itself. The World Eaters hit the plain like a red avalanche. Rampagers charged first, howling through vox grills and broken mouths, chain axes raised, meteor hammers swinging, their boots kicking up corpse slurry in great fans. Despoilers came behind them in a surging mass, bolt pistols firing as they ran, shells streaking across the parley ground and bursting among the grey line. Officers shouted commands that vanished beneath the roar. Dreadnoughts bellowed. Engines screamed. Widowmaker howled in Angron's hands as he lunged toward Russ with murder in his eyes. The space wolves did not break. Their front ranks lowered weapons. Russ drew his blade, and the parley died beneath the first thunder of Legion war. The bolt round that ended the parley became 100, then 1,000, then an unbroken storm. The killing field vanished beneath muzzle flare. Space Wolf bolters answered the World Eater's charge in disciplined volleys, each pack firing by command rune and oath click, each line withdrawing half a pace as the next line fired through the smoke. The first shells struck the leading rampagers before they had crossed a quarter of the corpse plain. Ceramite burst outward in fist-sized fragments. Breastplates cratered inward. One World Eater took a bolt through the lower ribs and kept running for 3 more strides before the shell detonated inside him, pulping both hearts and blowing his spine out through the rear of his armor in a wet fan of bone, cabling, and cooked meat. Another lost his helm in a burst of red fire. The face beneath came apart from the jaw upward, teeth and tongue, and fragments of black carapace plugs spinning into the ash. They did not slow. The World Eaters sprinted through the smoke of their own guns, through the shrapnel of their own fallen, through the blood mist thrown from bodies that died too slowly for the nails to respect. Bolt pistols cracked as they ran. Chain axes screamed in their fists. The charge had no clean front, no parade line symmetry, no measured advance of conquest. It was hunger in armor, a red-handed avalanche of warriors who wanted distance, murdered beneath their boots. "Hold!" came the Space Wolf command over the pack vox. The first line held. Grey Slayers locked shields, braced boots in corpse mud, and fired from behind the iron rim of their formation. Their helms were expressionless beneath the falling ash. Their kill runes glimmered in the intermittent lightning. A pack leader raised his axe without looking back. "By the All-Father's will," he growled. His warriors answered as one. "By the Wolf King's word." The World Eaters hit them. The impact was not a clash, it was a detonation of bodies. A rampager struck the shield wall with a meteor hammer already swinging. The spiked head smashed into a Space Wolf's shield, hard enough to cave the slab inward and drive fractured metal through the warrior's forearm. Before the wolf could recover, a chain axe came over the shield rim and bit into his helm. The teeth caught, shrieked, and tore down through the faceplate, opening the skull beneath in a spray of blood and neural fluid. The rampager planted one boot on the shield and ripped the axe free with half the wolf's head still caught in the teeth. Another World Eater leapt onto the line and vanished beneath stabbing blades. He dragged a Grey Slayer down with him, hooked knife punching through the neck seal, twisting until the wolf's arterial spray painted both their breastplates. Even after the Space Wolf's life signs died, the World Eater kept stabbing, snarling through vox distortion, each thrust a denial of restraint. All along the front, the first line buckled under the fury of the 12th. A hooked blade caught a Space Wolf behind the knee and tore through armor joint and tendon. He dropped to one leg. Two rampagers fell upon him, one pinning his bolter arm beneath an iron boot, the other hammering a chain axe into his chest again and again until the breastplate split and the meat within jumped under each blow. The wolf's pack brother stepped over him and drove an axe into the rampager's throat seal, severing cables, arteries, and spine in one brutal chop. The second rampager laughed as he took a bolt at point-blank range to the abdomen. His body burst open, but his axe still came down, cutting into the wolf's pauldron and biting deep into the shoulder beneath. "Fall back by packs," came the order. The Space Wolves withdrew, not in panic, not in rout. The first line broke apart into smaller knots, each pack moving through lanes, already marked in their helm displays, their wounded dragged by harness or abandoned if the signal rune over their life sign went black. They yielded the field by measured steps, firing as they moved, turning apparent retreat into a blade drawn backward for a second cut. The World Eaters saw only prey giving ground. They roared and followed. That was the first hook. The wolves withdrew between broken hab columns, thrusting from the plain like the ribs of a dead city. The structures had been marked before the battle with ash-colored runes invisible beneath the fog. Space Wolf packs passed between them in pairs, then split. The World Eaters crashed after them in a broader rush, too eager to maintain formation, too consumed by the sight of grey backs and bleeding bodies. "Left lane open," voxed a Space Wolf pack leader. "Bait confirmed," answered another. "Red snowpack yielding." "Yield, then bite." A World Eater. Despoiler vaulted a mound of corpses and landed among a pack of Grey Slayers, who had paused too long by design. He fired his bolt pistol into the nearest wolf's chest, the shell punching through the plate before bursting inside the torso. The wolf fell with both hearts turned to red pulp, steam venting from the ruptured seals of his armor. The despoiler swung his axe at the next warrior. The wolves countercharged in silence. 5 grey slayers came from the fog at his flank. One slammed a shield into his shoulder, turning the axe stroke aside. Another chopped low, taking the despoiler behind the knee. The World Eater dropped, still snarling, still firing. A third wolf pinned his weapon arm with a boot. A fourth hooked an axe beneath the helm rim and wrenched the head back. The fifth drove a blade into the exposed cabling and meat of the neck seal with both hands, then twisted until the head sagged loose. They were already moving before he hit the ground. Elsewhere, 10 wolves emerged from behind a corpse mound and struck the side of a rampager rush. They did not meet fury with fury. They hamstrung, they pinned, they killed with ugly efficiency. Axes cut tendons, bolters fired into joints at close range. Combat blades slipped through gorget seals. A World Eater had both legs cut from beneath him and continued dragging himself forward by his elbows, chain axe still roaring in one hand. A space wolf stepped on the weapon casing, crushed it into the mud, and split the crawling warrior's helm with a downward blow that lodged in the skull. The World Eaters bled. They did not stop. Their dead became footing for the living. Their wounded became obstacles to climb over or shove aside. They tore through the first pre-selected lanes, killed the packs assigned to bait them, and paid for every step in flesh they seemed willing to spend without count. Above the plain, heavy support joined the war. Volkite beams lanced from the ruins in murderous red-white lines. Where they struck, armor glowed, flesh flashed to steam, and warriors became ash-shadowed skeletons for the heartbeat before they came apart. One charging World Eater took a beam through the chest and burst into incandescent ruin, his bones blackening inside his armor before the suit collapsed around him like an empty shrine. Another staggered onward, while his left arm and half his torso burned away to grey dust, his chain axe swinging once, twice, then falling from fingers no longer connected to a living mind. Missiles screamed down from concealed ridge batteries. The first salvo hit a cluster of World Eaters sprinting through a broken boulevard of dead constructs. The explosions hurled bodies into the air in red and white fragments. A helm spun upward, trailing spinal cords. A severed hand still clenched around a bolt pistol, firing once as it cartwheeled through the smoke. Armor plates rained down, hot and sharp, cutting into the corpse mud. Autocannons began their long, brutal work. Sicaran rounds stitched across the advancing ranks, hammering into warriors who refused to slow, even as the shells tore fist-sized holes through their armor. A rampager lost one arm at the shoulder and kept running. A second burst took him in the chest and spun him around, exposing the ruined meat inside his cracked breastplate. A third removed most of his head. The body ran 3 more steps, then folded beneath the boots of the warriors behind him. The wolves killed by measure, the World Eaters killed by arrival. Where the 12th reached the grey line, space wolves died. The body count turned red. A pack of grey slayers held a narrow pass between 2 collapsed corpse pod carriers for almost a minute. They fired until their bolters clicked dry, then drew axes and met the charge. The first World Eater over the barricade was cut in half at the waist by a power axe, but his upper body crashed into the wolf who killed him and dragged him down. 3 more came after. The wolves took 2. The 4th opened a space wolf from hip to throat with a chain axe, screaming into the wound as if the dead warrior needed to hear him. By the time the pass fell, 17 World Eaters lay butchered in the gap, but every wolf who had held it was dead, dismembered, or still being hacked apart by warriors too far gone to notice the lane had already been won. Khan saw it through the smoke. He saw wolves withdrawing too cleanly. He saw World Eaters pushing too deeply. He saw gaps forming in the 12th's advance, companies stretching thin as blood thrown across stone. He heard officers trying to reassert control and failing beneath the howl. 3rd Assault Cohort, pull right, you are overextended. Contact, killing. Do not pursue beyond the corpse ridge. Wolves ahead. Hold your line. Wolves ahead. By the Primarch's blood, hold your line. Then only screaming. Khan clenched his jaw until pain flared against pain. The nails wanted him in the rush. They wanted him where Gorechild could speak, but command still had him by the throat, and so he stayed alive inside the agony of not killing. Farther ahead, Angron had entered the melee. The battle changed around him. He did not issue orders. He did not need to. His presence was command stripped to its most primitive truth. The World Eaters surged toward him as iron filings to a magnet, abandoning wounded, forgetting lanes, ignoring Vox discipline. To be near their father was to be nearer the heart of war. To die within sight of him was better than survival at the rear. Angron moved through the space wolves like an atrocity wearing flesh. Widowmaker took the first warrior across the torso, the chain axe teeth chewing through ceramite, ribs, hearts, and spine, before throwing the halves apart in opposite directions. A second wolf raised a shield. Angron struck once. The shield split. The arm behind it broke in 3 places. The return stroke tore the warrior's helm and head from his shoulders in a fountain of blood that steamed in the cold ash. A third tried to fire into Angron's face at close range. The Primarch caught the bolter, crushed the weapon and gauntlet together, then head-butted the wolf hard enough to cave the helm inward and burst the skull inside. He did not pause. A pack attacked him from both sides, disciplined even in the shadow of a demigod. One wolf cut at the back of his knee. Another fired into the damaged plates at his ribs. Another hurled himself at Angron's weapon arm, axe biting sparks from the Primarch's vambrace. For a heartbeat, they were what Russ had made them, a pack closing on a greater beast. Angron killed them, as if correction offended him. He kicked one so hard the warrior's body folded backward around the impact, spine snapping inside the armor before he hit the ground. Widowmaker removed the legs of another, then returned to split the fallen wolf from groin to sternum. Angron caught the last by the helm and smashed him face first into a corpse pod shell again and again until the helmet ruptured and what remained inside poured out through the broken visor slit. World Eaters howled his name. The wolves did not. They adapted. Russ was already among them, though not yet where Angron wanted him. The Wolf King fought like a storm that remembered its purpose. He did not drown himself in slaughter. He cut only where the battle required his hand. A World Eater broke through a gap toward a withdrawing pack. Russ was there, blade flashing once, and the warrior's head leapt from his shoulders. A dreadnought's advance threatened to crush a heavy bolter position. Russ signaled, and missile fire struck its knee joints while Grey Slayers swarmed the wounded machine with melter charges. A pack began to give ground too quickly. Russ's voice snapped across the Vox, cold and absolute, and they corrected their retreat under fire. He was savage, yes. His blade opened warriors with terrible ease. His fist broke ceramite. His presence made wolves fight harder and die quieter. But he refused the bait of personal rage. Every time a World Eater lunged at him, as if killing the Wolf King would end the war, Russ killed or evaded and turned his gaze back to the whole field. Inner packs, yield by the third mark, he voxed. Red snow is gone, came the answer. Then Blackmoor takes their blood debt and their place. By your word? Not by my word. By the hunt. The Space Wolves withdrew again. The World Eaters believed they were winning because the ground beneath their boots was filling with grey dead. In the immediate tally, they were right. The first Space Wolf lines were bleeding hard. Entire packs vanished beneath chain axes. Heavy weapon positions were overrun before they could displace. The corpse plain behind the wolves was littered with their own shattered brothers, frost grey plate split open and steaming. The 12th paid, but the 12th advanced. That truth fed them. It fed Angron most of all. He raised Widowmaker and roared, and the sound rolled across the field like a god's murder laugh. World Eaters who heard it broke into fresh speed, even wounded, even burning, even with limbs hanging useless from shattered joints. They ran toward his voice. They ran toward Russ's line. They ran into the shape of the trap, because the trap was made from the thing they loved most. Combat narrowed into corridors of blood. A grey Slayer pack tried to hold a wrecked hab column where the wolves' retreat lanes crossed. Rampagers came at them through artillery smoke, their armor painted red to the elbows. The wolves fired into them until the last instant, then countercharged in two groups. The rune slates did not show war as men understood it. They showed pressure. Grey lines bent across dead terrain. Red spearheads drove into them, narrowing as they advanced, then flaring where restraint collapsed, and warriors ran ahead of their own companies. Each icon was a warrior, a pack, a tank, a dreadnought, a gun nest, a wound in the larger body of the battle. Each flicker meant movement. Each rune going dark meant the dead had become too many for the machine spirit to name. From the shadowed command cradle of a half-buried land raider, Jarl Hrothskeld watched the World Eaters overextend exactly as the Wolf King had promised. The interior stank of heated oil, old blood, and the breath of warriors sealed too long in their armor. A cracked pict lens fed him broken images from servo skulls and forward helm slates. Malkoya's corpse plane appeared in layers of smoke and tactical runes, a world of ash rendered into the language of a hunt. The 12th Legion had punched through the first killing corridors with horrifying force. They had not been stopped. That was not their nature, but they had been shaped. Hroth saw the shape now. Angron's forward surge had drawn the red icons inward. Rampagers and despoilers had outrun their armor. Destroyer cadres lagged behind, blocked by corpse barricades and their own dead. Spartan assault tanks pushed too aggressively through broken ground, chewing through flesh mounds and Guenna wreckage, but their supporting infantry had thinned around them. Dreadnought talons advanced wherever the screams were loudest, not where the line required them. Outer teeth bleeding, voxed a pack leader. Expected, Hroth answered. Red snow gone, Blackmore at half strength. Ashen Howl reports encirclement by axe infantry. Hold your markers. They are in our faces. Then bite them there. The answer came back through static and dying breath. By the Wolf King's word, Hroth looked to the rune beside his gauntlet. Russ's command mark pulsed cold blue. Commit flanks. The Jarl lifted his fist. Varagir, close the causeways. Contemptors, anchor the corridors. Sicarans, sweep the open ground. Let the red fools feel the jaws. Across the corpse field, the reserves moved. The Varagir came through the fog like the old dead of Fenris, walking out of Saga. Terminator plate turned their bodies into fortress shapes, frost grey and iron, black beneath the ash. Their shields locked edge to edge at the mouths of ruined causeways, sealing passages between toppled hab columns and Guenna corpse pod towers. Axes hummed in their fists. They did not charge. They planted themselves where the World Eaters would have to come. The first red-armored warriors to reach them struck with all the fury of the nails. Chain axes screamed against storm shields. Meteor hammers slammed into ceramite faces. Hooked blades dragged sparks from the shield rims. The Varagir gave a handspan, no more. Then their axes rose and fell in brutal rhythm. A World Eater's arm came away at the elbow. Another had his helm split from crown to teeth. A third forced his way between shields and drove a chain blade into a Varagir's chest, only for the Terminator to crush him against the shield wall until his armor burst inward and blood jetted from every broken seal. The causeways locked. In the killing corridors, Contemptor dreadnoughts strode forward and became iron gates. Their sarcophagus voices boomed through the smoke in Fenrisian and battle cant. Kere's assault cannons spun up with a rising metallic shriek. Heavy fists opened and closed. One ancient stood astride a path between corpse ridges and fired until the corridor ahead of him vanished behind a storm of casings and torn bodies. World Eaters came through the fire anyway. Their armor shredded. Their limbs blew apart. They crawled, staggered, leapt, and died trying to reach him. A chain fist struck his left knee from the fog. A World Eater. Contemptor burst through a heap of dead Guennans, its own sarcophagus painted in gore and old blue, chain fist howling. The impact knocked the Space Wolf Ancient sideways. Armor plates buckled, pistons screamed. The two dreadnoughts collided like collapsing towers. "Traitor-hearted dog," the Wolf Ancient growled. "Blood," answered the World Eater sarcophagus, voice distorted into a mindless roar. "Blood, blood, blood." They tore at each other with the intimate hatred of warriors who had forgotten bodies but not murder. The World Eater's chain fist punched through the wolf's shoulder housing and chewed into the mechanisms beneath, spraying oil and sparks. The wolf answered by driving his power fist into the enemy sarcophagus, denting the front plate inward. Something inside screamed, not through lungs, but through vox emitters tuned to pain. The two giants staggered, locked, ripping cables from one another, crushing dead legionaries beneath their feet. A Sicaran squadron swept the open ground. Accelerator fire cracked across the battlefield in flat, murderous bursts. Shells hammered through World Eaters crossing exposed terrain, punching through ceramite and exploding inside enhanced flesh. Warriors disintegrated in strips. A rampager lost both legs and spun across the mud, still trying to crawl forward with his axe. A despoiler's torso burst open from hip to throat, scattering organs over the warriors behind him. A sergeant in red-smeared white plate took a line of shells through the chest and remained standing for a heartbeat, looking down as his armor emptied itself steaming onto the ground before toppling into the filth. Still the 12th came on. They smashed into the first cordon and broke parts of it by being willing to die too quickly for the wolves to kill them cleanly. A pack of Grey Slayers, anchored behind a wrecked corpse harvester, fired until their bolters ran dry. The World Eaters climbing over the machine's broken hull fell in heaps, their blood slicking the black iron. Then the next wave reached the top and jumped down among the wolves. There was no room for formation, no room for clean axe work. It became a pit. Helms cracked against helms, knives punched under gorgets, fingers tore at cables and eye lenses. A space wolf slammed his head into a World Eater's faceplate until both visors shattered, then bit into the exposed cheek and ripped meat free before a chain axe took him through the spine. The World Eaters butchered the position, but the delay turned their left flank red on Hroth's display. "Mark exposed," he voxed. Missile batteries hidden among the refinery bones answered. The salvo fell into the stretched World Eater flank and opened it like a carcass. Armor flew apart. Bodies vanished inside fireballs. Phosphex canisters carried by a destroyer cadre ruptured under secondary detonations, spilling pale green flame across the mud. The fire clung to ceramite, to flesh, to the dead and living without mercy. World Eaters burned and kept running, their screams made ecstatic by the nails, leaving green fire footprints in the corpse paste. Vehicle engines thundered as the armored lines collided. A World Eater Spartan rammed through a barricade of Guennan podshells and dead tanks, its front plow painted with crushed bodies. Lascanon fire struck it from the flank, cutting black holes through its armor. The Spartan did not stop. Its assault ramp slammed down while still moving, grinding half open against a mound of corpses, and despoilers spilled out into autocannon fire. Behind them, crew serfs burned alive in the breached cabin, their silhouettes jerking behind the vision slits as ammunition cooked off around them. A Space Wolf Land Raider met the Spartan head-on. The collision drove both war machines sideways. Ceramite screamed against ceramite. Track units bit into mud and bone. The Land Raiders' Lascannons fired at point-blank range, slicing into the Spartan's side and turning the interior into a furnace. The Spartan answered with a hull-mounted weapon burst that blew the Land Raider's forward sponson apart, killing the gunner and spraying his cooked remains across the transport bay. The two tanks ground together like beasts locked by the throat. A World Eater. Dreadnought climbed onto the Land Raider's hull and drove a chain fist through the roof. The teeth chewed downward into the crew compartment. The driver died first, torso shredded against his restraint throne. A space wolf inside fired his bolter upward through the breach until a shower of molten metal and red mist poured over him. The Land Raider lurched, reversed, and crushed a group of burning serfs beneath its treads, their bodies bursting wetly under the machine's weight. The battlefield became a vast engine that ran on meat. Russ saw it all. He stood near the buckling center, his armor scored and smoking, his blade dark to the hilt. Around him, space wolves died by the pack, and world eaters died by the rush. His helm display fed him rune slates from command nodes, pack leaders, tank augurs, and the cold instinct of his own mind. The center was bending. The 12th believed it was breaking. Good. A pack rune flashed amber, then red. Ashen Howl. They were trapped in a depression between corpse mounds, cut off by world eaters who had pushed too far and too fast. Their pack leader's helm feed showed the world tilted and red. 5 wolves remained alive, perhaps fewer by the next breath. Their position, if held, would force an entire world eater spearhead to turn inward, exposing its flank to the Varagir causeway line. Lord, came Hroth's voice. Ashen Howl is encircled. I see them. They cannot withdraw. No. They request leave to break toward our line. Russ watched the icons move. He saw the future in angles and blood. If they broke now, the World Eaters would follow in a broad rush and crash against a position not yet sealed. If they held, they would die, and the red spearhead would bear its side. He opened the pack channel. Ashen Howl, he said. Static answered, then a voice thick with blood. Lord, hold for 3 minutes. A pause. The pack leader understood before the order finished echoing. We will be dead before 2, then be stubborn in death. A wet laugh crackled over the vox. Aye, coordinates follow. The last wolves of Ashen Howl did not make speeches. They sent data, range markers, enemy density, armor angles, dreadnought position, the location of a World Eater captain screaming orders near a corpse ridge. Their final service was not glory. It was measurement. Then the World Eaters reached them. The helm feed showed the first rampager leaping through smoke, chain axe raised. A space wolf caught him with a shield and drove a blade into his belly, but another came over the fallen body and smashed a meteor hammer into the wolf's helm. The faceplate burst inward. The wolf dropped without a word. The pack leader fired twice, blowing one attacker's chest open and another's arm off. He took a hooked blade through the thigh, then a chain axe across the back. He fell to one knee. A World Eater grabbed his helm with both hands and wrenched upward. The seal resisted. The World Eater braced one foot against his chest and tore again. The helm came free with meat. Attached, cables snapping, black carapace plugs ripping out in bloody strings from the warrior's neck and skull. The pack leader did not scream. His last vox click transmitted a coordinate correction as a World Eater's teeth closed on his exposed throat. Russ listened until the channel went dead. Fire, he said. The exposed World Eater flank disappeared beneath Lascanon beams, missile bursts, and Sicaran fire. Ashen Howl's death brought a corridor of slaughter. Red icons vanished in clusters. A World Eater. Dreadnought staggered, lost its left arm to a beam strike, then took a missile through the sarcophagus and exploded in a storm of armor shards and boiling amniotic fluid. Warriors who had been tearing at Space Wolf corpses looked up just in time to be cut in half. The wolves were cruel because they could count the dead before the dead had fallen. Khan saw it from the 12th's forward command knot, and cold understanding crawled beneath the heat of the nails. The wolves were not failing in the center. They were feeding it. Every time the World Eaters broke a line, another waited at an angle. Every time they overran a pack, fire struck the flank. Every victory pulled them deeper. Every corpse they made became part of the path Russ wanted Angron to walk. Khan seized a Vox officer by the shoulder, hard enough to crack the mortal's armor. "Patch to third assault. Pull them back from the corpse depression. Now!" The officer fumbled with blood-slick controls. "Channels overloaded, Lord. Too much interference. Too much close Vox." Khan shoved him aside and took the rune set himself. "Third assault cohort. Wheel left. Wheel left, curse you. Do not follow the grey line. You are being drawn." The answer came as laughter, screaming chainblade howl. "Wolves ahead, Khan." "Wheel left. Wolves ahead. Your Primarch is being isolated." That should have mattered. It did not. Or if it did, the nails murdered the meaning before it became action. "Angron advances," came the reply, thick with reverence. "We follow." Khan looked up. Angron was deeper now. The Red Angel had driven through every attempt to slow him. Space wolf bodies lay in his wake in pieces, some bisected, some crushed, some torn so thoroughly that only fragments of grey plate marked what they had been. He bled from several wounds, and the blood made him brighter. Bolt impacts had scored his armor. An axe had cut deep into one thigh. A plasma burn smoked along his ribs. None of it diminished him. Resistance fed him. Pain sharpened him. The more the wolves hurt him, the more alive he seemed, as if every wound reminded him that the universe still had something honest to offer. His sons saw him and became worse. They followed with religious madness, though no god had yet claimed the shape of their devotion. They shouted his name. They dragged themselves forward with missing limbs. They killed wolves already dead because the act of killing near him felt like participation in his being. Officers screamed for formation and were ignored. Captains tried to redirect companies and found themselves carried by the tide they were meant to command. Angron did not look back. Russ allowed the center to buckle. To any eye that counted ground and corpses, the wolves were losing. Their visible line bent inward. Their packs fell back over their own dead. World Eaters reached positions that should have been secure. Smoke hid the flanks. The grey formation seemed to fold under the red pressure, but the outer ring had closed. The causeways were sealed. The kill corridors anchored. The hidden reserves had moved through corpse fog and broken ruins into place. Varagir stood behind Angron now, not near enough to strike, but near enough to deny retreat. Grey Slayer packs emerged from the dead ground to either side. Contemptors turned their guns inward. Heavy bolter teams shifted aim from broad formations to a narrowing point on the field. Hroth saw the rune pattern complete. Khan saw it too late. Russ stood at the far side of the corpse plain, visible through a gap in the smoke. He looked battered, bloodied, and alone enough to tempt a butcher's heart. Angron saw him. The Red Angel lifted Widowmaker, teeth screaming, and began cutting a straight path toward his brother. Around him, the inner ring formed in silence. Space wolves stood on every side, weapons raised, not aimed at the 12th Legion as a whole, but converging toward the place where Angron was about to stand. Angron reached Russ through a wall of dead men. The battlefield did not quiet. Bolters still hammered. Chain axes still screamed. Tanks still roared through smoke with their engines choking on ash and corpse dust. Dreadnoughts still bellowed from broken causeways, their voices rolling across the plain like iron gods arguing over the dead. Yet around the Primarchs, the war seemed to draw away from mortal meaning. It became distant, blurred, lesser. The legions were still killing one another by the score, but every eye that could looked toward the place where the Red Angel and the Wolf King stood beneath the blackened sky. Angron came on with Widowmaker in both hands. Blood ran from him in hot sheets. Some of it was his, most was not. The chain axe's teeth dragged a screaming line through the ground, chewing stone, bone, and scraps of torn ceramite into powder. The butcher's nails jerked beneath the skin of his skull. His lips were drawn back from his teeth. He looked less like a lord of war than war itself made furious that it had been given flesh. Russ stood waiting amid the corpse fog. He had his helm on now. The wolf-skull visage stared through ash and muzzle flare, its lenses cold and pale. Krakenmore rested in his hand, the blade dark with the blood of Angron's sons. His armor was scored, dented and burned, but he stood with the balance of a warrior who had not forgotten the whole field for the sake of one enemy. Behind him, wolves died holding the line. Beside him, none rushed to his aid. Before him came his brother, and the lesson's final shape. Russ raised his blade, not in salute, in warning. "Look around you, Angron." Angron did not slow. "Look," Russ said again, voice carrying through the vox thunder and chain-blade shriek. "Your sons are stretched thin. Mine hold the ring. Your charge has carried you where I wished you to stand." Angron's answer was a growl. Russ pointed with Krakenmore, not toward Angron, but toward the field. "Your left is cut from your armor. Your right bleeds against causeways held by my Varagir. Your reserves are trapped behind their own dead. Your warriors cannot hear their captains. They hear only pain and your name."
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support really helps.
The words struck the air between them like thrown knives. They were not shouted with anger. That made them worse. Russ spoke as a warlord naming a wound before cutting deeper. "Look, brother, this is what command is. This is what restraint buys. You have won the path to me and lost the ground behind you." Angron heard judgment. He heard the high platforms of Nuceria. He heard masters speaking of lessons while slaves bled into sand. He heard another king explaining the virtue of chains. His eyes locked on Russ. "Still talking," Angron said. Then he attacked. Widowmaker came around in a blow that would have split a battle tank's flank plate. Russ met it with Krakenmore, and the impact cracked the air. The sound rolled over the corpse plane hard enough to make nearby warriors flinch inside their helms. Sparks burst in a white storm. The force drove Russ back a step through the blood mud. Angron followed before the sparks died. His second swing came lower, cutting through a mound of dead Guennans, and the corpse of a World Eater caught too close. The dead legionary's torso vanished beneath the chained teeth, armor and meat flung in a red arc across Russ's greaves. Russ turned the stroke aside by a fraction, not stopping it fully, letting the monstrous force slide away while he stepped in and carved Krakenmore across Angron's ribs. The blade bit. Ceramite split. Blood flashed bright across Angron's side. The Red Angel laughed. It was a sound of pain, finding pleasure only because pleasure had been burned out of him long ago. He drove forward with his shoulder, smashing into Russ with enough force to shatter stone. The Wolf King staggered, boots furrowing the ground. Angron hammered Widowmaker down. Russ moved, and the chain axe struck the earth where he had stood, exploding the roadstones into shrapnel. Fragments punched through the armor of a nearby space wolf and tore open the throat of a World Eater behind him. Both fell without understanding that they had died inside a Primarch's missed blow. Russ cut at Angron's weapon arm. Angron twisted, impossibly fast for something so vast, and the blade glanced from his vambrace. He answered with a backhand strike of the axe haft that caught Russ across the helm and snapped his head aside. The Wolf King rolled with it, dropped low, and drove one armored fist into Angron's midsection. The blow cracked plate and would have folded a lesser warrior around the impact. Angron barely gave ground. He brought his forehead down into Russ's helm. The collision rang like a bell struck in a slaughterhouse. Russ stepped back, helm lenses flickering. Angron advanced, Widowmaker screaming. Around them, the legions intensified. World Eaters hurled themselves at the inner ring, trying to reach their father. They came in snarling packs, blood-mad and half-blind from the nails, throwing themselves against the space wolves, with such force that several of the grey lines bowed inward. A rampager climbed over a wall of his own dead and leapt at a Varagir shield, driving both chain axes into it until the teeth caught and snapped. The Varagir shoved him back, and another wolf drove an axe through the rampager's neck seal. The World Eater's head came half free, hanging by black carapace cables and strips of meat, yet his hands still clawed at the shield until a bolter round detonated in his chest. The wolves did not break formation. That was the insult. That was the lesson. Their Primarch fought within sight, under threat, bleeding before them, and still they obeyed. They did not abandon the ring to save him. They did not surge forward in proud stupidity. They held their places, killing and dying, where Russ had told them to stand. A pack of grey slayers watched Angron drive Russ backward and snarled like beasts behind their helms. One took half a step forward. His pack leader slammed an axe haft across his chest. "Hold! The Lord bleeds." The Lord commanded. A World Eater hit them before more could be said, and the pack vanished beneath chain blades. Russ and Angron moved faster than the eyes of lesser beings could follow. To the warriors watching, the duel was a collision of storms. To the Primarchs, it was language. Angron read violence before it happened. Not strategy, not formation, not the larger shape of war. But the intimate truths of killing lived in him like breath. He saw the turn of Russ's shoulder and knew where the blade would fall. He saw the shift of weight and knew the kick before it came. He heard the faint change in armor servos and knew when strength gathered for a strike. The pits had made him fluent in moments. The nails had carved away hesitation until only reaction remained. Russ read more. He read Angron's strength, Angron's pain, Angron's need to close, to overwhelm, to turn every exchange into the hot mathematics of the arena. He read the world beyond the duel, the tightening ring, the flanks, the kill lanes, the places where his wolves would die, and the places where their deaths purchased aim. He did not fight like a lesser warrior trying to defeat Angron blow for blow. He fought like a king, using even his own blood as part of the field. Widowmaker struck again. Russ caught the haft near the axe head with his free hand, servos whining as the chain teeth snarled inches from his pauldron. Krakenmore stabbed upward, point seeking the exposed cabling at Angron's neck. Angron released one hand from the weapon, caught Russ's wrist, and squeezed. Armor buckled under the Primarch's grip. Russ twisted, drove a knee into Angron's thigh wound, and ripped free before the bones of his wrist could break. Angron snarled and kicked him. The blow lifted Russ from the ground and hurled him backward through a broken statue torso. Black stone shattered around him. He hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up on one knee as Widowmaker descended. Russ raised Krakenmore. The chain axe slammed into the blade. The ground beneath Russ cracked. For a heartbeat, they were locked there, Angron bearing down with monstrous strength. Russ braced beneath him with both hands on his sword. Widowmaker's teeth shrieked against Krakenmore's edge, spitting sparks and fragments of metal. Angron's face was inches from Russ's helm. Blood dripped from his mouth onto the Wolf King's visor. "Where is your lesson now?" Angron hissed. Russ pushed against him, slowly, impossible strength answering impossible strength. "All around you!" Angron roared and broke the lock by sheer force. The next strike came too fast. Widowmaker's edge caught Russ across the torso. The chain teeth bit into the armor of Elavagar and chewed through rune-marked plate with a sound like a gate to hell being forced open. Ceramite tore. The underlayer split. The weapon dragged across Russ's chest and side, carving deep enough that blood burst from the wound in a steaming sheet. The impact hurled him back through splintered stone and the corpse of a dead Guenna engine thing, smashing both beneath his weight. The space wolves saw it. A growl moved through the inner ring. Not fear, rage. The kind that turned the world red at the edges and made even disciplined killers ache to abandon command. Several wolves shifted. One pack surged before its leader barked them still. Avaragir took a step, then locked his shield again with visible effort. Heavy bolter teams kept their weapons aimed not at Angron's back, not yet, but at the space around him. Russ rose, slowly. Blood ran down his armor and dripped from the torn plates. Steam curled from the wound. His breath rasped through his helm grill. A lesser being would have been opened and emptied. A lesser Primarch might have answered with rage. Russ laughed once. Low, ugly, Fenrisian. Angron came again. This time Russ did not retreat. He stepped inside the arc of Widowmaker with the timing of a beast that had finally chosen the throat. Krakenmaw struck the chain axe's housing, not the haft, not Angron's flesh. The blow landed where the weapon's brutal mass became machinery, where teeth, drive chain and casing met beneath layers of gore and impact scoring. Sparks erupted. Widowmaker screamed higher. Angron wrenched the axe back. Russ struck again. The second blow split the casing. A third came from below, Krakenmaw's edge punching through metal and into the weapon's heart. The chain teeth locked. The drive assembly shrieked. Widowmaker bucked in Angron's hands like a wounded beast. Angron's eyes widened, not in fear, in outrage. Russ brought his blade down with both hands. Widowmaker broke. The sound was not clean. It was a death cry of metal, teeth, and old slaughter. The chain axe's head split under the blow, one half spinning away into the mud, still twitching and snarling as the dying mechanism shed broken teeth. The haft cracked down its length. Shards of the weapon that had opened cities and men alike scattered across the corpse plain. For a heartbeat, the world eaters faltered. Some saw only a weapon broken. Some saw blasphemy, without yet having a god to name it. Some howled louder to bury what it meant. Russ stood bleeding, Krakenmaw raised, and the meaning of the blow hung between the Primarchs. He had struck not Angron's body, but the symbol of the pit, the execution engine, the gladiator's truth made steel, the thing Angron held between himself and every voice that ever called him slave. Angron looked at the ruined haft in his hands. The nails screamed. He threw what remained of Widowmaker aside. Then he came at Russ with his bare hands. No weapon had ever been the truth of Angron. It had only been an extension. The Red Angel himself was the weapon, and disarming him only stripped away the lie that there was anything between his rage and the world. He crashed into Russ with a roar that drowned nearby gunfire. Krakenmaw flashed, cutting across Angron's shoulder, opening flesh to the bone. Angron ignored it and seized Russ by the sword arm. His other fist hammered into the Wolf King's helm once, twice, 3 times. The blows cracked the outer plate and drove Russ backward. Russ drove a knee into Angron's gut, headbutted him, and slashed low. Angron caught the blade. Krakenmaw bit into his palm, carving through gauntlet and flesh. Blood poured down the sword's edge. Angron closed his fingers around it anyway. Russ twisted the weapon, trying to rip it free. Angron stepped in and slammed his forehead into Russ's damaged helm again. The visor cracked. He struck again. Russ answered with a punch to Angron's throat that would have crushed a tank crewman into boneless meat. Angron gagged, spat blood, and smiled through it. Then he wrenched Krakenmaw sideways. The blade screamed in Russ's grip. Angron drove his fist into the sword's spine at the point already stressed by the duel's earlier impacts. Metal shrieked. Russ pulled back, but Angron held the edge in his bleeding hand and struck again. Krakenmaw broke. The blade snapped in a flash of sparks and falling fragments. The Wolf King did not hesitate. He drove the broken length into Angron's side, punching it through armor and into muscle. Angron snarled and answered with a hook that caught Russ beneath the helm and lifted him off his feet. He slammed the Wolf King down into the ground, hard enough to crater the black road beneath them. Russ rolled, came up with the broken sword still in hand, and struck for Angron's heart. Angron was already inside the blow. He caught Russ around the torso and drove forward, carrying him through a corpse mound, through a broken pillar, through the ruptured shell of a Guenna pod. Bodies burst under them, Stone cracked. Russ hammered the broken blade into Angron's back, once, twice, drawing blood each time, but Angron kept driving until the Wolf King struck the base of a shattered monument and the stone exploded around him. The impact forced Russ to one knee. Angron seized him by the throat. The wolves snarled across the ring. Bolters rose by fractions. Plasma coils brightened. Missile locks trembled over their target. But still they held. Still they obeyed. Space wolves died in the cordon, rather than rush to their father. World Eaters died trying to reach theirs. The lesson stood in blood around them, undeniable and unseen. Angron punched Russ in the chest wound. The blow sank into torn armor and split it wider. Blood surged out hot over Angron's gauntlet. Russ grunted, a sound of pain forced through clenched teeth. He drove the broken remnant of Krakenmaw into Angron's thigh. Angron barely looked down. He struck Russ across the helm with enough force to tear the Wolf King free of the monument and hurl him into the mud. Russ tried to rise. Angron was on him before he could stand. The Red Angel drove a knee into Russ's chest and pinned him to the corpse-choked ground. One hand closed around Russ's damaged helm. The other drew back, fist clenched, bleeding, trembling with the nails and the promise of the kill. Around them, guns thundered, axes shrieked, men died, engines burned. But for the World Eaters, there was only this sight. Their father stood over the Wolf King. Russ lay beneath him, blood steaming from his broken armor, the shattered remains of Krakenmaw clenched in one hand. Angron raised his fist. The World Eaters howled loud enough to drown the guns. Angron stood over Leman Russ with his father's blood on his fists. The corpse plain seemed to kneel beneath him. The broken road had cratered where the Wolf King had fallen. Stone, bone, and pulped synthetic flesh ringed the impact site in a jagged crown. Russ lay half-buried in the ruin, armor split across the chest, helm cracked, one hand still locked around the shattered remnant of Krakenmaw. Blood steamed from him in the freezing ashfall, dark and bright at once, running through the runes cut into his warplate and dripping into the mud made from dead Guennans and dead Legiones Astartes. Angron's shadow covered him. The Red Angel's breath came in harsh bursts. His shoulders rose and fell like forge bellows. The cables of the butcher's nails twitched against his scalp, each pulse dragging pain through his skull and turning pain into command. His gauntlets were broken at the knuckles. One palm was split where Krakenmaw had bitten into it. Blood ran down his fingers in thick ropes, pattering onto Russ's breastplate. He had no weapon. He did not need one. Around them, the war devoured itself. The World Eaters howled in triumph, hurling themselves at the inner ring with renewed frenzy. The sight of Angron above Russ burned through the Legion like revelation. Warriors with missing hands tried to bite through grey armor. Rampagers with shattered ribs dragged themselves into axe range. Despoilers emptied bolt pistols into shield walls and then leapt after the shells, screaming their father's name as if it were a weapon. The Space Wolves held. That was what made the moment terrible. They saw their Primarch beneath Angron's knee. They saw the Red Angel raise a fist heavy enough to crush a tank hatch. They saw the torn wound in Russ's chest and the blood pooling beneath him. They snarled. They shook. Their fingers tightened on triggers and axe hafts. Some leaned forward as instinct clawed against obedience, but they held. Their line did not break inward. No pack abandoned its place. No Jarl bellowed a rescue charge. No warrior rushed to die beautifully at his father's side. They stayed where Russ had put them, killing World Eaters who tried to pierce the ring, dying beneath chain axes rather than leave the formation incomplete. Angron saw none of it, or perhaps he saw and refused to grant it meaning. His world had narrowed to the broken king beneath him. The pit had returned. The crowd was roaring. The enemy was down. The moment between victory and the killing stroke had opened like a throat. Russ looked up at him through the cracked lenses of his helm. He did not beg. His breath rasped once through the damaged grill. Blood bubbled at the edge of the fracture in his faceplate. When he spoke, his voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried through the vox, through the private channels of the wolves, through the open roar of the field, cold and exhausted, and edged with something almost like sorrow. "Look around you." Angron's raised fist paused. The nails shrieked at the delay. His jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck stood out like cables. "Still," Angron growled, "you teach. Look." The word was not command. It was condemnation. Angron's eyes remained on Russ. Russ forced himself higher on one elbow. The movement opened the wound in his chest. Blood spilled hotter, darker, and he gave a low sound that might have been pain or laughter. "You can kill me, then my sons kill you. That is the difference between a warrior and a king." Angron bared his teeth. The word struck, and the battlefield revealed itself. The corpse fog shifted under the hammering wind of gunships and burning engines. For a breath, the ash thinned. The ring became visible. Space wolves stood on every side. Bolter packs held their aim in locked ranks, muzzles fixed on Angron's position. Plasma gunners knelt behind corpse ridges, coils glowing sun-bright, their weapon spirits whining for release. Missile teams crouched among broken Guenna statues with target runes steady over the Red Angel's form. Heavy bolters sat braced across shattered pod shells, ammunition belts feeding into guns, already tracking the smallest movement. Contemptor dreadnoughts anchored the lanes, their assault cannons spun and ready, their sarcophagus lenses burning with ancient hatred. Varigir terminators held the causeways behind him, shields locked, axes lifted, forming iron walls across every path his sons might use to reach him. They were not aimed at the World Eater's line. They were aimed at Angron. The wolves had not come to save their father. They had obeyed him. Their discipline was the weapon. Russ's battered body was the bait, the shield, and the proof. He had stood in the center of the field and let the Red Angel come. He had let the charge pull Angron away from armor, away from command, away from any shape of war beyond the kill before him. The duel had been a pit fight. The battle had been a hunt. For the first time since the charge began, Angron looked beyond Russ. Not long, only a heartbeat, but long enough. He saw the Varigir behind him. He saw the guns. He saw the kill lanes that had closed like jaws. He saw World Eaters throwing themselves against the ring and dying because rage could not make space where discipline had sealed it. He saw his sons stretched across the corpse plain, their officers lost in the noise, their armor delayed, their reserves snarled behind piles of dead. He saw the wolves dying exactly where they had been ordered to die, not because they lacked fury, but because they had mastered it. The truth entered him like a blade. He had beaten Russ. He had also walked into Russ's mouth. The nails answered the truth with fire. They punished comprehension. They turned thought into agony, and agony into rage. Angron's face twisted. His fingers flexed around empty air. Blood dripped from his clenched fist onto Russ's broken helm. "You think this means something?" Angron said. Russ did not move. "It means everything. It means your sons point guns because they are too weak to come closer. It means they know why they stand where they stand." Angron laughed, but the sound had no victory in it now. It was jagged, forced through pain. "I put you in the mud. I broke your blade. I split your armor. I opened you. I beat you while your dogs watched." Russ's voice was quiet. The admission enraged Angron more than denial could have. "Then I won." The wolves heard it. The World Eaters heard it. Khan heard it through the storm of Vox static and the hammering pulse of his own nails. Kern stood beyond the nearest press of World Eaters, Gorechild turning low in his hands. He had fought toward his father and failed to reach him, not from cowardice, not from lack of bloodshed, but because the wolves had made every path into a killing seam. Around him, His brothers were dying with smiles on their broken faces. A despoiler beside him took a bolter shell through the throat seal. The detonation blew the helm upward in a spray of bone chips and red mist. Another World Eater stepped over him without looking down. Khan saw the ring. He saw it entire. The wolves were losing warriors by the heap. Their dead carpeted the approaches. Their packs had been torn apart, their shields hacked through, their bodies opened and mutilated beneath chain blades. In the red tally of immediate slaughter, the World Eaters had taken more. Any butcher could count the ground and name that victory, but war was not only counting corpses. Khan hated the thought as soon as it formed. The nails bit it. Pride struck it. Loyalty tried to drown it, yet it remained. They had won the killing. They had lost the shape. He tried the vox again. Forward companies, break left and widen. Do not press the ring. The reply was a roar of overlapping voices. Angron stands. The wolf is down. Forward. Kill the grey dogs. Angron stands. Khan closed his fist around the vox bead until the casing cracked. Command had become noise. Noise had become devotion. Devotion had become death. In the center, Angron leaned closer to Russ. "You call this kingship?" he said. "Hiding behind sons with guns? Spending lives so you may speak a clever word from the dirt?" Russ's cracked helm turned slightly, enough that one pale lens fixed on the Primarch above him. "I call it command. I call it cowardice. You would." Angron's fist trembled. The wolves' weapons tracked the movement. Plasma coils brightened another degree. Missile runes steadied. Contemptor guns whirred, the barrels turning just enough to become promise. The Varagir lowered their axes by a fraction, ready to charge only after the first storm of fire tore the target open. The whole ring was one held breath. Russ saw it through blood and fractured vision. He saw his sons ready to murder his brother if the lesson required the final stroke. He saw Angron's sons still throwing themselves against a formation they did not understand, because they could not bear distance from their father's violence. He saw the proof laid before them all in meat and fire, and he saw Angron refuse it. The Red Angel looked across the field, not at the encirclement, but at the corpses. His eyes moved over the dead wolves, the split helms, the shattered shields, the packs hacked apart beneath his legion's charge. He saw what pain allowed him to see. Blood shed, ground taken, a brother beneath him, sons still roaring. "Look at them," Angron said. "Your dead are everywhere." Russ's reply came slowly. "So are yours. Mine died moving forward. Mine died holding purpose." "Purpose." Angron spat the word as if it were poison. "You dress defeat in words." Russ shifted beneath him. The movement was small, but every gun in the ring seemed to tighten with it. "You dress ruin in blood." Angron's fist lowered until it hovered above Russ's broken helm. "You wanted me to learn," he said. "Learn this. A king dies like any other thing when enough strength is put through his skull." Russ did not flinch. "No," he said. "A warrior dies there. A king leaves a death that still commands." For a moment, the two Primarchs remained locked in the center of the ring. Around them, the battle raged. A World Eater managed to break through a shield gap and sprinted toward Angron, screaming wordlessly. 3 space wolves shot him before he had crossed 5 paces. Bolter rounds struck his chest and abdomen, each detonation blowing red cavities through him. He fell forward, crawling even as his organs dragged behind him in the mud. A Grey Slayer stepped on his spine and put a final round through the back of his helm. The Space Wolf did not look toward Russ afterward. He returned to the line. The lesson stood again. Angron saw it. He understood, enough to hate it. That was the tragedy of him. Not stupidity, not ignorance. Something in him could see the shape. The gladiator had survived too many arenas not to recognize a trap after the gates closed. The commander buried beneath the nails, beneath New Syria, beneath betrayal and rage, could feel the truth scraping at the inside of his skull. But every lesson smelled of chains. Every restraint spoke with a master's voice. Every proof that did not end in immediate blood felt like obedience dressed as wisdom. The nails would not let him kneel to it. His soul would not let him thank the hand that offered it. He rose slightly from Russ, not in mercy, but in disgust. "You lose," Angron said. Russ breathed once, wet and heavy. "Then kill me and prove it." The ring waited. Khan took a step forward despite himself, Gorachild growling higher. He knew what would happen if Angron struck. The wolves would fire. Perhaps they would kill his father. Perhaps not. Perhaps a Primarch could survive even that first storm, wounded and maddened, long enough to tear another path. But the ring was too perfect, the guns too many, the wolves too disciplined. If Angron brought his fist down, the corpse plain would become the Red Angel's execution pit. Khan wanted to shout. He did not know what word could matter. Angron stared down at Russ. His breathing slowed by a fraction. The nails ticked, 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 like insects chewing through bone. Then Russ gave the order, not to fire, to withdraw. It passed through the Space Wolf command channels like winter through a forest. Pack by pack, Jarl by Jarl, the wolves heard their Primarch's voice, hoarse with blood but absolute. Disengage by marked lanes, outer ring covers inner, armor smoke, heavy packs suppress, recover only those within reach, leave the rest. For a heartbeat, even the Space Wolves seemed unwilling to believe it. Then they obeyed. Smoke launchers thumped. Grey clouds rolled across the corpse plain. Heavy bolters opened in controlled bursts, not to advance, but to deny pursuit. Plasma guns vented heat and stepped back by pairs. Missile teams withdrew behind the ridges. Varigir shields remained locked until the first Greyslayer packs had moved. Then they began to fall back one pace at a time, axes ready, every movement deliberate. Contemptor dreadnoughts walked backward through the fog, guns still aimed at the World Eaters pressing the ring. Angron looked at the retreating wolves, then down at Russ. Russ forced himself to one knee. Blood poured from him. His armor hung open across the chest. His broken blade scraped against stone as he rose. He looked less like a victor than a corpse refusing instruction. But his sons moved by his will, not because he was standing tall, not because he had won the duel, not because he had slain the enemy, because command endured even when the commander bled. Angron's face contorted. "You run," he said. Russ looked at him through the cracked wolf helm. "No," he answered. "I stopped wasting sons on a brother who will not learn." That struck deeper than Widowmaker ever had. The World Eaters howled as the wolves began to pull away. They saw retreat. They saw triumph. They saw the Grey Killers yielding ground and called it proof. Chain axes rose. Bolters fired into the smoke. Wounded warriors laughed with mouths full of blood. Khan saw Russ turn from Angron. He saw the Wolf King limp back into the fog, surrounded not by a rescue charge, but by a formation still functioning around him. He saw Space Wolves leave their dead where they had fallen, because retrieving them would serve nothing. He saw discipline withdraw from madness, with its teeth still bared. The World Eaters had the field. They had the corpses. They had the roar. And somewhere beneath the nails, beneath loyalty and rage, Khan knew the wolves had left with the thing they had come to show. Angron stood in the center of the killing ring as it dissolved around him, blood-soaked and unbowed, while his sons screamed victory to a sky black with ash. Russ did not look back. The wolves did not run. They vanished by discipline. Smoke rolled across the killing field in layered banks, thick and bitter, spilling from launchers, burning tanks, shattered pod casings, and the corpse fires of Guenna. Within it, the Space Wolves moved like a retreating winter storm, drawing back without panic, without haste, without the broken animal stink of fear. Shield packs withdrew first in locked knots, shields held high against bolt fire and thrown blades. Behind them, heavy squads walked backwards step by step, firing controlled bursts through marked lanes, their muzzle flashes pulsing like cold stars in the black fog. "Left pack falling," a wolf growled over the vox. "Right pack covering. Wounded by harness, dead by oath. Dead remain." No one argued. No one prayed aloud. No one wasted breath on grief, while breath could still feed a helm rebreather or steady a weapon. A grey slayer with one leg severed below the knee was dragged through the mud by an armor harness clipped to his pack brother's belt. His wound sprayed bright arterial arcs across the churned ground each time his heart beat. His gauntlets still gripped his bolter. He fired one-handed at a World Eater pushing through the smoke, the round striking the charging warrior in the faceplate and detonating inside the helm. Blood and bone mist burst from the rear seal. The headless body kept running for another pace before folding into the mud. "Leave me," the wounded wolf voxed. "Be silent. I slow the pack. You shoot well enough." The wounded warrior laughed once, a wet sound behind his grill, and fired again. Behind the withdrawing infantry, Contemptor dreadnoughts held the line like iron cliffs. Their assault cannons spat long tongues of fire into the pursuing World Eaters. Their heavy fists smashed warriors aside in sprays of ceramite and blood. One ancient stood alone in a broken causeway, his left arm hanging by cables, his hull burning from melter scars. World Eaters climbed over the dead to reach him, chain axes shrieking against his armor. "Back, honored one," came the command. The dreadnought answered with a growl older than most of the warriors dying around him. "Not yet." A rampager vaulted a corpse mound and drove both axes into the ancient's damaged knee. The dreadnought looked down, seized the warrior in his power fist, and crushed him until his armor collapsed inward and blood burst from every joint seal. Another World Eater plunged a chain blade into the sarcophagus seam. The ancient fired point blank, shredding the attacker into red vapor and spinning armor fragments. Only when the first extraction craft descended through the ash did the dreadnought begin to fall back, limping, firing, leaving a trail of oil, blood, and burning metal. The World Eaters saw only withdrawal. They tasted victory in it and were made madder. They surged after the wolves in ragged tides, but what had been a charge was now a convulsion. Their formations were torn open. Their officers were dead, ignored, or screaming orders into channels drowned by battle lust. Ammunition counters blinked empty across helm displays. Bolt pistols clicked dry and were thrown aside. Chain axes with broken teeth were used as clubs. Warriors abandoned brothers still crawling in the blood mud because pursuit mattered more than recovery, and because the nails made mercy indistinguishable from weakness. "After them," a captain roared, though half his helm was gone and his jaw hung exposed in a wet red crescent. "After the grey dogs." No one formed around him. They ran past. Another officer tried to pull a despoiler company into a coherent wedge, striking warriors with the flat of his axe, cursing them by Primarch and Legion. A World Eater with both eyes gone beneath a cracked visor stumbled into him, laughing, swinging at shadows. The captain shoved him aside and was carried backward by his own charging warriors, swallowed by the momentum he could no longer command. Angron wanted pursuit. He stood in the smoke at the heart of the field, his chest heaving, his hands flexing open and closed as if still closing around Russ's throat. Blood covered him from scalp to greaves. His own blood ran in darker streams through the red already painted across him. The broken remains of Widowmaker lay behind him in the mud, half buried beneath the bodies of wolves and World Eaters. He did not look at it. "Run them down," he snarled. The nearest centurion hesitated for the smallest fraction of a heartbeat. That was almost enough to kill him. "My lord, the companies are scattered. Armor is mired. The wolves have smoke and extraction cover. We must reform before pursuit." Angron turned his head slowly. The centurion's mouth snapped shut. "Reform," Angron repeated. The word sounded like something dragged from a corpse. "They flee," the Primarch said. "They bleed. Their king crawls from me, and you speak of reform. The centurion lowered his gaze. "I speak of killing more of them, Lord." For a moment, the nails twisted Angron's face into an expression too pained to be rage and too hateful to be thought. Then a fresh burst of bolter fire cracked from the smoke, cutting down several World Eaters who had charged into a marked lane. Their bodies opened in red blossoms. One fell with his spine, hanging from the back of his shattered armor like a torn cable. Angron roared toward the fog. His sons answered. Russ heard the roar through the thunder of engines and the static hiss of his damaged helm. He stood beneath the shadow of a descending stormbird, one hand pressed against the rent in his chestplate, the other holding what remained of his broken blade. Apothecaries waited within reach. He had not yet permitted them to touch him. Blood ran down his armor in streams, dripping onto the ramp where it mingled with the ash. "Lord," Ogvai voxed, "the red ones push into the smoke. We can turn and gut them. One counterstrike, Varagir on the flank. Sicarans still have munitions. Give the word and we leave them howling." Russ watched the smoke. Shapes moved within it. World Eaters dying, killing, stumbling after prey they could no longer truly reach. The instinct to strike lived in him. It was not absent. It was a beast at the bars of his ribs. Pride wanted him to turn. The wound in his chest wanted answer. The sight of wolves left dead in the mud wanted a reckoning measured in severed heads and burning war machines. He mastered it. "No." The word was iron. Ogvai did not answer at once. Then, "By your word." Not one pack turns back for pride. Not one Jarl spends sons to polish my honor. We came to show him the ring. He saw it. He would not learn. More killing teaches nothing. He will call this victory. Russ breathed through pain. Let him choke on it. The withdrawal continued. A pack of space wolves reached a corpse ridge where 6 of their brothers lay dead, rune-marked, their armor bearing the signs of ashen howl. Their bodies had been hacked open by World Eaters after death. One had no head. Another's chest had been split and emptied. The pack leader stopped for a heartbeat, looking down at the runes carved into their pauldrons. "Can we carry them?" asked one of his warriors. The pack leader looked at the advancing red shapes in the smoke, then at the extraction marker blinking cold blue beyond the ridge. "No. They are ours. They remain ours." A World Eater bolt struck nearby and blew a fist of mud and bone into the air. The pack leader reached down, tore a blood-slick rune plate from the nearest corpse, and Mag locked it to his belt. "Take names," he said. "Leave weight." They withdrew, and the dead watched them go with broken lenses. Shame followed them harder than enemy fire. Across the plain, the aftermath of the battle revealed itself in glimpses as the smoke shifted. Broken power armor lay piled in heaps like offerings at the feet of uncaring gods. Frost-grey and blood-white plates were tangled together, limbs twisted through limbs, hands still locked around throats, axes buried so deep in chest cavities that the weapons had to be abandoned. Shell craters boiled with blood where promethium fires burned across the surface, bubbling fat and synthetic fluid into black scum. Severed limbs twitched from nerve spasm, fingers opening and closing around empty air. Helm speakers crackled with dying vox loops, calling names no one would answer. A dead dreadnought burned near the center of the field. Its sarcophagus had been breached. The warrior inside had not died quickly. His screams still poured from the corrupted vox grill, chopped into bursts of static and pain. A World Eater stood beside the wreck, laughing as he hammered a broken chain axe into the sarcophagus again and again, long after there was anything left inside that could feel the blows. Khan walked through the dead. He did not know when he had stopped chasing. Gorechild rested in his fist, its teeth turning slowly, chewing air. Blood ran down his armor, some of his own, much of it wolf. The nails still burned, but the first frenzy had begun to sour. That was always the cruelty of them. They promised release through violence, then withdrew it the moment violence ended, leaving only a deeper hunger and the memory of how briefly the pain had become bearable. He counted, without admitting he counted. Here, 3 world-eaters for 1 wolf. There, 5 wolves dead beneath 1 rampager who had been blown apart from the waist down. Farther on, a pack of space wolves cut to pieces around a corpse marker, but around them lay a crescent of red dead, thick enough to clog a tank tread. He saw warriors laughing beside brothers whose gene seed had been ruined by overkill, skulls smashed too thoroughly, chests churned to paste by repeated chain-axe strikes, progenoid glands shredded by the very hands that should have guarded the Legion's future. A young despoiler knelt over a dead space wolf, hacking at the corpse's faceplate with a combat blade. Khan stopped beside him. "He is dead." The warrior looked up. Blood had painted the lenses of his helm. "He insulted me." When? Before, during, I do not remember. Khan looked at the mutilated body. "Then he has won another moment from you." The despoiler froze, not understanding, or understanding and hating it. Khan walked on. The Legion had won something. The field, perhaps. The roar. The story they would tell one another until it became harder than truth. Angron had thrown Russ down. The wolves had withdrawn. Their dead lay in the mud. Their gunships lifted into the poisoned sky. But victory should have had a taste. This tasted like iron, ash, and a wound reopened by its own hand. At the center of the field, Angron raised both arms. His sons gathered as best they could, a broken congregation of killers, bleeding and laughing, weapons lifted toward the burning heavens. Some crawled because they could not stand. Some leaned on axes with exposed bone showing through torn armor. Some carried trophies. Some carried nothing because their hands had been lost and they had not yet noticed. Angron's roar tore across them. The answer shook the corpse plain. Chain axes rose. Bolt pistols fired into the sky until empty magazines clicked. World Eaters screamed their triumph to Guenna's dead clouds. They shouted that Russ had fallen. They shouted that the wolves had run. They shouted that the Emperor's executioner had bled beneath the Red Angel's fists. Angron stood among them, vast and blood-soaked, and for a while the sound seemed to hold him upright. Then the rush began to fade. It happened by degrees. First the battle clarity dissolved. Then the roar of his sons became noise instead of nourishment. Then the pain returned with teeth. The nails punished him for stillness. Angron walked away from the shouting, past dead warriors and burning engines, past officers trying to gather casualty rolls, past apothecaries already cutting into the fallen. No one followed him closely. His sons knew better. Triumph did not make him safe. Nothing made him safe. He stopped beside the wreck of a Guennan statue and pressed one hand against the stone. His fingers sank into cracks already made by shellfire. The nails hammered behind his eyes. Each pulse was a nail driven deeper. The victory did not quiet them. Russ's blood on his hands did not quiet them. The memory of the Wolf King beneath him did not quiet them. Nothing quieted them. He had beaten his brother. He had stood over the king of Fenris. He had heard his sons howl the truth of it. And still the pain remained, worse than remained. It demanded continuation. More battle, more impact, more skulls breaking beneath his fists, more bodies opened, more thunder to drown the thin, hateful voice of thought. Look around you. Angron's hand closed on the stone. It cracked beneath his grip. He slammed his fist into the statue once, twice, then again, pulverizing the dead king's face into black fragments. The blows did not help. They never helped for long. In the ash above, Space Wolf gunships climbed through the poisoned sky. Russ stood at the open ramp of one of them, chained upright by will more than strength. Apothecaries worked around him, despite his growled refusal, injecting sealants, clamping torn armor away from meat, pressing surgical pads into the wound that had almost opened him from sternum to spine. Guenna fell away beneath him, its dead continents hidden by storm and smoke. Ogvai stood nearby, silent. The Wolf King looked down through the ramp's wind, and ash. Somewhere below, Angron still lived, still raged, still called the ruin victory, because the alternative would require understanding. Russ had come to strike sense into a brother, and had found no brother there that could receive it. Not truly. There was a Primarch's strength, a gladiator's fury, a slave's hatred, a legion's devotion curdled into sickness, but the thing that might have learned had been buried too deep under iron and pain. Russ closed his cracked gauntlet around the broken remnant of Krakenmore. "He is not disobedient," he said at last. Ogvai looked to him. "Lord." Below them, Guenna vanished into cloud and corpse smoke. Russ's eyes remained on the dying world. "He is lost." The apothecarian smelled of iron, frost, burned meat, and old Fenrisian incense. Russ sat upright on a surgical throne not built for a Primarch. The machine had been reinforced in haste by iron priests, its restraint arms locked open because no one aboard the flagship had dared bind the Wolf King while he still drew breath. Brass-clawed servo rigs hung above him, hissing as they fed sutures, sealant, analgesic coils, blood filters, and bone clamps to the legion apothecaries working below. Rune charms swung from chains over the chamber doors. Their shadows moved across the walls like carrion birds. His armor had been cut away from the wound. The rent Angron had carved across him was obscene. It opened from the upper chest down across the ribs, deep enough that lesser beings would have been emptied onto the deck by the first heartbeat. Layers of transhuman muscle had been shredded. Rib plating showed through torn flesh. Blood welled and steamed, despite the cold, pumped through the surgical chamber. The wound stank of chainblade oil, hot ceramite dust, and the Red Angel's battlefield filth. A Legion apothecary leaned in with a bone saw and a prayer knife. Russ caught his wrist. The apothecary froze. "No dulling," Russ said. "My lord, the trauma is extreme. No pain suppression. Your secondary heart is under strain. The wound requires deep closure." I said no. The apothecary held still beneath the Primarch's grip. His helm lenses reflected the crack in Russ's own face, the split lip, the bruising already darkening one side of his jaw, where Angron's fists had hammered through the helm. "As you command!" Russ released him. The iron priest beside the throne clicked a Binharic curse and drove a clamp into place. Hooks bit into flesh. The wound was pulled wider. Blood ran in a thick sheet down Russ's torso and into the trough below the throne, where it mixed with black shavings of armor and fragments of the broken chest plate. Russ did not close his eyes. "Reports," he said. Ogvai stood before him with a slate in both hands. Blood marked the Jarl's armor from helm to greaves. Some of it had dried black. Some was fresh enough to shine. He had lost the fur mantle from one shoulder, burned away by plasma splash or phosphex, and a Chainak scar had opened his pauldron to the underlayer. "My lord, let them close you first. Reports." The Jarl's jaw tightened. Around the apothecarian, the other wolves pretended not to hear the defiance that had almost formed and died behind his teeth. Ogvai looked to the slate. "Red snowpack, erased." Russ gave no answer. "Blackmore pack, 17 dead, 4 recovered. One will not see the next war unless the iron priests make him iron." A clamp sank into Russ's side. His fingers dug into the arms of the throne until metal groaned. "Continue." Ashen howl. "No living recovered." "I know." "Bodies left under enemy pressure." "I know." "Rune plates recovered from 3. Russ breathed once, deep and wet. Names entered. "Already carried to the Saga Vault." "Continue." Ogvai did. The names came like hammer blows. Packs reduced to fragments. Packs gone entire. Varagir brothers dead in causeway locks. Their shields found split. Their bodies still standing in some places because World Eater axes had wedged them upright against the barricades. Heavy bolter crews crushed beneath Spartans. Missile teams overrun and dismembered. Grey Slayers taken apart in the lanes they had been ordered to hold. Dreadnoughts unrecoverable, their sarcophagi breached, their ancients still screaming until their reactors were given mercy by distant fire. Ancient. Hrafnkel is lost, Ogvai said. Russ's eyes narrowed. Confirmed. His chassis burned through. Sarcophagus ruptured. We could not recover the remains. His final transmission was enemy density and range adjustment. The Iron Priest working at Russ's wound paused, not from sentiment, but from recognition. A dead dreadnought was not only a casualty, it was a murdered age. Russ nodded once. Record him as still standing. Ogvai looked at the slate again. Gene seed loss is severe. Some progenoids recovered. Many burned by plasma, pulped by chain weapons, or contaminated past use by rad residue and corpse bile from the Guenna dead. Apothecaries report several glands destroyed by post-mortem mutilation. A wolf near the chamber door growled, "World-eater filth!" Russ looked toward him. The warrior fell silent. "No," Russ said, "not filth. Sons. That is the horror of it." The apothecary sealed a torn vessel with a hiss of heat. Burned blood filled the air. Russ's face remained still, but one eye twitched with the pain he had refused to soften. Ogvai lowered the slate. "The tally is not yet complete." "It never is." "My lord, we bled for a lesson," he spat back in your face. Russ looked down at the open wound in his chest, at the clamps holding him together, at the blood still threading across his skin in dark streams. "Aye. He beat you. Aye. He will sing that from every deck of his fleet. Aye." Ogvai's voice hardened. "Then we should have killed him." The apothecarian went still, except for the soft ticking of surgical machines. Russ raised his gaze. There was no anger in it. That made the Jarl's defiance seem smaller and more dangerous. The Wolf King looked less like a wounded beast then, and more like the thing the Emperor had made beneath all furs, runes, and saga masks. A Primarch, a Lord of War, a weapon that understood the cost of being drawn. "Killing a brother is not a lesson," Russ said. Ogvai met his eyes. "No, it is a sentence." Russ leaned back as the apothecary drove sealant deep into the wound. His breath came out through his teeth. "Just so." "Then sentence him." Russ's hand closed around the broken fragment of Krakenmaw lying across his lap. The blade's shattered edge caught the apothecarian light. Angron's blood had dried along the metal in dark flakes. So had Russ's. "You think I do not want it?" Russ asked. Ogvai said nothing. "You think my blood is colder than yours? You think I saw Ashenhowl die and felt nothing? You think I watched him waste his sons against mine and did not wish to put him down like a maddened beast?" The Jarl's silence became obedience. Russ looked past him, toward the wall where a hololithic projection of Guenna still burned in muted red. "I was sent to bring him to heal, not to begin the war that waits for all of us if brothers learn how easily brothers may be slain." The words sat in the cold air. None of the wolves named the shadow they cast. They did not know its future names. Istvan, Prospero, Terra. They only felt the old chill of a saga whose ending had already been written in blood none of them had yet spilled. Russ closed his eyes for the first time. Not in weakness, in calculation, in memory, in the bitter turning of a lesson that had cost too much to be called failure and achieved too little to be called victory. "I spent them," he said. No one asked who. The dead filled the room without bodies. I placed them where they would die. I ordered them to hold. I told Ashenhowl to remain in the jaws until the bite closed. I let Angron come to me. I let him strike me. I let him believe the pit was the world. You showed him. Russ opened his eyes. I showed him, he said. That is not the same as teaching. Far below, on the dead world, the world eaters held their feast. It was not a feast as mortal armies knew the word. There were no long tables, no wine, no banners washed and hung in triumph, no songs of victory shaped by poets and liars. There was meat, but little of it was eaten. There was fire, but mostly to burn corpses, heat blades, and cauterize wounds. There was laughter, but it came from broken mouths and minds driven raw by the nails. They gathered in the ruins outside Malkoya, where the corpse plain began. Warriors fought wounded brothers, because stillness had become unbearable. Two despoilers circled one another inside a ring of cheering legionaries, each missing pieces of armor, each bleeding from injuries that should have earned apothecarian attention. One struck too slowly. The other caught him by the helm, drove a combat blade through the left lens, and twisted until the warrior beneath went rigid. The crowd roared approval. The killer dragged the blade free, flicked eye jelly and blood from the tip, and immediately turned on the nearest brother who had cheered too close. Chain blades were tested on the dead. Space wolf bodies were hauled onto broken stone blocks. Axes came down again and again, sometimes for trophy, sometimes to see if a repaired motor housing would bite cleanly, sometimes because the body still wore grey, and that was reason enough. Rune plates were pried from pauldrons. Fanged helms were split for display. One World-Eater laughed as he hacked the hands from a dead Varagir, claiming the fingers had gripped too long, even in death, and deserved separation from their lord. Apothecaries worked beside the ritual without joining it. Their hands were red to the elbow. They cut gene seed from the fallen 12th where they could, cursed where they could not, and ignored the warriors vomiting blood, laughing through collapsed lungs, begging not for aid, but for permission to return to the line that no longer existed. A legionary lay on a slab with both legs gone, and his abdomen open to the night. An apothecary reached into the ruin of him. Primary viable, the dying warrior grinned. Did we win? Yes, said a nearby rampager, before the apothecary could answer. Angron broke the wolf. The wolves fled, said another. We killed more, said a third. Russ crawled. Their dead choked the field. Angron stood. The grey dogs ran. The phrases repeated around the fires, passed from mouth to mouth until they became rhythm. Angron broke the wolf. The wolves fled. More of them died. Angron stood. The Emperor's executioner bled. Each claim was true enough to be useful and incomplete enough to be safe. Repetition hardened it. Laughter sealed it. The nails rewarded the simple shape. Khan heard all of it. He walked among the fires with Gorachild chained across his back, and a wound in his side held shut by black staples. His helm hung at his belt. The air touched his face with ash and hot blood stink. He had not allowed the apothecaries to do more than close the worst bleeding. Pain kept the mind clean, or so the Legion liked to say. Pain also made lies easier to love. Karn, called a captain from beside a wrecked land raider. You saw it. Tell them how our father put Russ in the mud. Karn looked at him. The captain's armor was broken across the chest. One arm ended at the wrist. He had tied a space wolf's broken fangs to his remaining pauldron. Yes, Karn said. He put Russ in the mud. The warriors around them roared. Another leaned close, eyes bright with Nail's fever. And the ring, the grey dogs pointing guns like frightened mortals, that was nothing, nothing. They did not fire. Karn's mouth tasted of iron. They did not fire, he said, because they feared him. Karn looked across the field, where the dead still lay thickest around the place Angron had stood. He remembered the guns, the plasma coils, the missile locks, the dreadnought weapons held ready. He remembered the wolves not moving to save Russ, because they had already become the weapon that would answer if he died. Perhaps, Karn said. The warrior laughed and stumbled away, satisfied by the word, because he had already chosen its meaning. Karn stood alone amid his brothers, and listened to victory trying to convince itself. In the ruin of a Guennan audience hall, Angron sat upon a cracked block of black stone that had once been part of a ruler's throne. No one feasted near him. The fires there burned lower. The warriors who passed the broken doorway did so quickly. Even Khan did not enter at first. The Red Angel sat hunched forward, elbows on knees, hands hanging between them. His fists were wrapped in crude bandage where the broken sword had cut him and where Russ's armor had split his knuckles to the bone. Blood soaked through the wrappings. His skull cables twitched beneath the dim light. He had won. Russ had fallen beneath him. Krakenmoor had broken. The Wolf King had withdrawn wounded from the field. The World Eaters chanted the truth of it outside until the words became a storm. Angron stared at the floor. The nails did not care. They hammered, they ground, they dragged hooks through his thoughts. The battle rush had faded, and with it went the brief mercy of impact. The pain returned to its throne inside him. Every sound became too sharp. Every moment without killing became an accusation. His own breath irritated him. His own heartbeat mocked him by continuing without violence to justify it. Look around you. The words would not die. He snarled and dug his fingers into the stone block. Chips cracked away beneath his grip. You can kill me. Then my sons kill you. Angron closed his eyes, and the field returned. Not as Russ had wanted him to see it. Not cleanly. Never cleanly. But in fragments. Grey warriors holding while their Primarch bled. Guns aimed and steady. World Eaters rushing, dying, not hearing. Khan's voice over the vox, warning of the shape. The wolves withdrawing in order, leaving their dead because recovery served no purpose. He opened his eyes. Thought was a chain. Reflection was a collar. Meaning was another master's hand reaching for the back of his neck. He stood suddenly and drove his fist into the stone wall. The first blow cracked it. The second split it. The third tore skin from his knuckles and sprayed blood across the black surface. He kept striking until the wall sagged inward and dust poured down around him. Outside, his sons heard the thunder and cheered, believing their father still celebrated victory. Khan stood beyond the doorway, listening. He did not enter. He understood enough to know understanding would not save them. Aboard the flagship, the first reports were already leaving the war room in sealed forms. Not the truth. Not all of it. Imperial recorders wrote in careful phrases. Disciplinary intervention, post-compliance censure, limited interlegionary clash, strategic withdrawal after objective completion. The world Guenna would be marked as scourged, pacified, rendered compliant by necessary severity. Casualty rolls would be sealed. Vox recordings would be restricted. Picked evidence of space wolves encircling a brother Primarch beneath their guns would vanish into vaults watched by men who knew which truths weakened empires. No scribe would write that two legions had nearly destroyed one another before the Great Crusade ended. No public chronicle would say Angron defeated Russ in the duel and refused the war around it. No sanctioned account would admit that Russ had bled his own sons to show a broken brother the difference between slaughter and command. The truth was too dangerous, so the Imperium began to do what it did best. It made a cleaner lie and called it history. The first lie was written in red ink because the scribe had run out of black. He sat in a chamber below the flagship's strategium, surrounded by sealed casualty cylinders, cracked pict reels, blood-stained vox transcripts, and the cold scrutiny of men who had been ordered to remember selectively. He was not a remembrancer in the old romantic sense, not one of those soft-eyed witnesses who followed the Great Crusade to turn conquest into verse and atrocity into noble metaphor. He was an archivist of compliance actions, a keeper of approved truth, a mortal hand in the long machine that transformed ruin into record. His stylus trembled when he reached the line describing the engagement outside Malkoya. He had seen enough picked fragments to know what the words were meant to bury. He had watched warriors in frost grey and blood white tear one another open on a dead world that had already been stripped of mercy. He had seen the Wolf King bleeding beneath the Red Angel. He had seen space wolves forming a killing ring around a brother Primarch. He had heard the Vox scream with orders that no imperial proclamation would ever admit had been given, Limited interlegionary disciplinary contact, he wrote. The red ink dried badly on the parchment. A man with a censor's seal stood behind him. Remove disciplinary. The scribe swallowed. My lord? It implies fault. There was fault. The chamber seemed to become colder. The man with the seal leaned closer. He wore no armor. He needed none. His authority sat upon him like a blade held near the throat. Fault is determined above your station. Right post-compliance. Strategic correction. The scribe scraped the line away with a knife. Elsewhere aboard the fleet, picked reels were burned in braziers that smelled of hot metal and chemical film. Mechanicum adepts stood beside their data vaults and watched entire streams of battlefield memory vanish under coded purge rites. Servo skulls carrying forbidden recordings were cracked open and their memory cores dissolved in acid. Casualty rolls were sealed under layered authorization keys. Names of packs erased from open ledger and transferred to Saga Vault only. Armor loss reclassified. Dreadnought destruction logged as unrecoverable materiel degradation under hostile atmospheric conditions. The lie was not clean. Lies never were. It leaked truth around the edges. The Imperium could not openly admit what Guenna had shown. The Great Crusade lived on the myth of unity. It required the image of 20 divine sons, moving outward beneath one father's will, each legion a different blade in the same hand, each compliance another stone in mankind's road back to dominion. That myth could endure dead worlds. It could endure massacres, purges, xenocides, orbital firestorms, and the screams of populations ground into obedience. It could not easily endure brother legions, spilling one another's blood before the dream had even finished naming itself eternal. So Guenna became a scouring. Malkoya became a compliance complication. The dead became acceptable variants. Russ submitted his report before the apothecaries had finished sealing his wound. He stood in the strategium with fresh clamps beneath his repaired chest plate, pain held in the set of his jaw and nowhere else. The broken remnant of Krakenmore lay across the hololithic table before him, beside fragments of world-eater chain teeth recovered from the field. Around him, his jarls waited in silence. None offered counsel now. The lesson had been bought. Whether it had been received was the wound no blade could close. A slate projected his words into the air. Angron remains capable of transhuman combat dominance beyond reliable containment by ordinary Legion command structures. Russ watched the line form. He did not smile. The 12th Legion demonstrates catastrophic aggression fixation under combat stimulus. Command and control decay rapidly once close assault begins. Officers retain rank, but not always authority. The Primarch's presence acts as accelerant rather than stabilizing center. Precise, true, incomplete. No slate could carry the rot in the air around Angron. No report could make the Emperor feel the way the butcher's nails turned silence into torture. No measured phrasing could show how the Red Angel heard any lesson as a master's command and any restraint as a collar. Russ could describe the danger. He could catalogue the disorder. He could recommend sanction, oversight, separation, pressure, correction. He could not make the golden master of mankind understand that something inside one of his sons had been murdered long before Guenna. Ogvai stood near the table, watching the words become record. "You do not write that he refused the lesson," the Jarl said. Russ kept his gaze on the projection. Reports are for what can be acted upon. That can. No, it can only be mourned or punished. Then write that. Russ looked at him. Punishment will come in its own hour. The Jarl's expression hardened. You speak as if it is certain. Russ touched the broken blade with one gauntlet. It is. The morning of the 6th Legion began without tears. In a hangar bay cleared of gunships and ash-smeared armor, the wolves gathered around iron plates taken from damaged tanks and shattered landing craft. The names of the dead were carved there, not with quills or styluses, but with blades. Each pack came forward in turn. A warrior would speak a name, then cut it into iron deep enough that no polish would smooth it away. Sparks fell like small stars. Blood from the carver's palm was rubbed into the groove. Fenrisian spirits were poured over the plate, sharp enough to sting the air, then mixed with the blood until the names shone dark. Red Snow, Ashen Howl, Blackmoor. Names of individual warriors followed. Some were spoken with epithets earned that day. Some were spoken plain because their deeds had already been known. Some had no bodies to accompany the sound. Some had only a rune plate, a broken fang token, a severed gauntlet, or a strip of torn pelting recovered under fire. Blades were notched for brothers left behind. Not every notch marked an enemy killed. Some marked a shame endured. A body abandoned because recovery would have cost more lives. A dreadnought left to burn because the extraction window had closed. A pack ordered to die because Russ had required the field to take a certain shape. The wolves did not soften these things. No one said the dead had fallen cleanly. No one pretended sacrifice made the mud less foul. No one spoke of glorious necessity in the tone of men trying to excuse themselves. They remembered where each pack had stood, what it had purchased, and who had given the order. Russ stood among them. He did not weep. He did not bow his head for long theatrical grief. His cruelty remained visible in him, hard and cold. He had spent those warriors. He would not dishonor them by pretending the price had been forced entirely by fate. When Ashen Howl's names were carved, he stepped forward and cut the last mark himself. The blade in his hand bit deep. Blood ran from the wound reopened beneath his armor and darkened the plate at his feet. "They held for 3 minutes," said the surviving bearer of their rune plate. Russ looked at the carved names. "They held until they were dead. Aye. Then carve it so." The words went into the iron. On Guenna, the World Eaters made memory from noise. Their version required fewer words and less iron. Angron beat Russ. The wolves fled. The 12th stood victorious. The Emperor's executioner bled and withdrew. This was enough. More detail weakened the taste of it. More detail opened cracks where doubt might breathe. The story spread from fire to fire, from armor bay to medici pit, from corpse field to orbiting warships. Warriors repeated it while their wounds were stapled shut. They repeated it while sharpening damaged chain teeth. They repeated it while dragging Space Wolf trophies through the mud. They repeated it because it fed the shape of the Legion's need. It told them that fury had humbled discipline. It told them that the pit had beaten the hunt. It told them that their father, ruined and glorious, had broken the wolf who came to judge him. Khan heard the myth harden. He did not correct it, not because he lacked courage. Khan had walked nearer Angron's wrath than almost any living son of the 12th, and survived by honesty measured in dangerous amounts. He did not correct it, because he knew what correction would become. An insult, a weakness, a king's word, a chain. He stood in a vehicle bay where tech marines worked over a ruined Spartan, watching serfs scrape dead space wolf flesh from the treads. One crewman had been crushed into the drive teeth so thoroughly that only blackened bone fragments and scraps of grey armor identified him. Nearby, a World Eater with one arm gone at the shoulder laughed, while an apothecary burned the stump closed. "Say it, Khan," the wounded warrior called. "You were close. Say how he broke him." Khan did not look away from the treads. He broke his blade. And his pride, perhaps. The warrior laughed harder, mistaking the word for agreement. Khan watched the serfs work. The treads turned slowly as the machine spirit was tested, grinding what remained of the dead into paste that fell in wet clumps onto the deck. He remembered the ring. He remembered Russ telling Angron to look. He remembered the guns aimed at his father's heart. He remembered the wolves leaving because more slaughter would have served nothing. Truth stood beside myth like a silent brother no one wished to acknowledge. Khan carried both. That was his burden. To know enough to suspect Russ's point, and to love Angron too fiercely, too painfully, to name it. Loyalty was not blindness. It was sometimes the choice to keep seeing and still remain. Angron gave orders from the broken command dais of a Guennan war vault. He did not speak of Russ, except to snarl when others spoke too much. He did not ask for casualty totals beyond what was required to rearm. He did not demand review of the battlefield. No formation study. No correction of assault doctrine. No punishment for officers who had failed to hold their companies together once the charge began. No reward for those who had sensed the trap. Reflection died at the edge of his pain. "Repairs," he said. The officers stood before him, bloodied and exhausted. "Rearmament. Replace losses from reserve strength. Salvage armor. Wake the sarcophagi that can still walk. Strip the Guennan vaults for munitions. I want drop assets ready before the next translation." A centurion bowed his head. "For what warlord?" Angron's face twitched. "The next one." No one asked where. The galaxy was wide and full of throats. The butcher's nails clicked and pulsed beneath the flesh of the legion. They were already more than punishment, more than augmentation, more than shared mutilation. They were becoming a road, though no warrior yet knew its destination. Every battle taught the same lesson in reverse. Blood quieted pain for a heartbeat. More blood was needed when the heartbeat passed. Slaughter became relief. Relief became hunger. Hunger became identity. Somewhere beyond thought, beyond reason, beyond the thin walls of imperial truth, there waited a god-shaped absence with a brass throne and an appetite vast enough to love them as they were. The World Eaters did not know its name as destiny yet. They only knew the next war would make the pain smaller for a while. In the dark between stars, the fleet gathered itself. Wounded ships sealed their hulls. Armories reloaded. Apothecaries stored what gene seed they had salvaged and cursed what had been wasted. Tech Marines patched dreadnoughts that should have been granted final death. Warriors carved new marks into their plate, chained wolf trophies to their shoulders, and laughed whenever silence threatened to return. Guenna dwindled behind them, a dead world wrapped in smoke and lies. Ahead, the void opened. Somewhere in that darkness, another battlefield waited. The World Eaters went toward it laughing. Years later, men argued over what to call it. The archivists of the Imperium called it a scouring, because scouring was a useful word. It had the clean taste of necessity. It suggested ash where there had been blood, order where there had been madness, correction where there had been brotherhood breaking its teeth upon itself. In sealed ledgers and restricted fleet logs, Guenna became another world brought to heel by severe compliance action. Another ugly note in the long march of the Great Crusade. The dead were counted, sealed, misfiled, and hidden beneath red wax and oath code. The wolves called it the Night of the Wolf. They spoke the name around iron fires, never loudly, never with boastful warmth. Among the sixth, it was not a tale for cubs drunk on saga and glory. It was a hard thing, told by veterans whose hands had carved the names of dead packs into iron plates. It was a memory with teeth, a warning that even the Emperor's sons could become prey, and that a warrior might have to die without moving from the place his lord had ordered him to stand. The World Eaters called it proof. Proof that Angron had humbled Russ. Proof that the Wolf King had bled and withdrawn. Proof that discipline broke when struck hard enough. Proof that the pit was truer than the hunt, that fury was purer than command, that the only lesson worth teaching was taught through a fist, an axe, and a body driven into the mud. All of them remembered blood. None of them remembered all of it. Guenna remembered more than any record. The dead plain outside Malkoya did not heal. Rain came at last through the ash storms, falling black at first, then grey, then red where it struck the dust and woke old blood from the soil. The broken processional road vanished beneath a skin of mud, made from powdered stone, corpse fat, spent propellant, and the remains of men too ruined to be named. The rain filled shell craters until they brimmed with dark water slicked by oil. Beneath the surface lay chain teeth snapped from world-eater axes, wolf talismans crushed flat by tank treads, helm lenses staring upward under inches of red sludge, broken armor fused with the ground where plasma had burned too hot for recovery. Frost-grey plates lay melted into white and blue ceramite. Heraldry had peeled away. Pack runes and legion marks became flakes of pigment in the mud. Stripped of color, the dead were harder to divide. A severed arm in shattered plate, a ribcage emptied by a chain axe, a skull burst inward behind a cracked visor, a heart too large for any mortal man, cooked black in its own armor shell. Wolf and World-Eater became meat together when the symbols were gone. Malkoya stood above them like a corpse too, large to bury. Its towers had collapsed into themselves. Its vaults yawned open beneath the city, full of pale artificial bodies rotting in their pods. Its streets were clogged with the remains of two wars, the first against the Guenna dead, the second against the Emperor's own sons. Wind moved through the broken city and made sounds like distant vox static. Sometimes old ammunition cooked off in the heat beneath the ruins, a single crack echoing over the plain, as if the battle had remembered one more shot. The survivors remembered differently. A space wolf who had stood in the inner ring would later tell the tale with his hands closed around a cup of bitter Fenrisian spirit, though he never drank while speaking. He would say that Angron was a storm without sky, that every blow he struck seemed to make the world smaller. He would say Russ fell because truth did not shame the wolves. He would say the Wolf King bled so badly that the earth steamed around him. He would say every warrior in the ring wanted to charge, and every warrior held. That was the part that mattered. Not the duel, not the pride, not the wound in Russ's chest or the breaking of Krakenmoor, the holding. The survivor would touch the notch on his blade where he had marked the body he left behind and say, "We did not move." Among the World-Eaters, a warrior with half his jaw replaced by iron would tell another version in the dark between wars. He would speak while chained teeth were being changed and blood dried in the joints of his gauntlets. He would say Angron shattered the wolf. He would say Russ had been beneath him, like any other beaten thing. He would say the wolves fled because they knew death had taken their lord by the throat. He would laugh when he said it, and others would laugh with him, because laughter kept silence away. If any of them remembered the ring of guns, they did not speak of it. If any remembered the way the wolves withdrew in order, they spat over the memory. If any remembered Khan's voice on the Vox, warning that the field was wrong, they buried it beneath louder truths. Khan remembered. That was his curse. He carried the tale in two shapes, and neither gave comfort. He had seen Angron win the duel. He had seen Russ trapped beneath him, wounded and beaten, his blade broken in his hand. No lie could erase that. His father had been magnificent in the old terrible way, a gladiator god of pain and impact, a being made for the moment when distance vanished and the enemy's breath could be felt through broken teeth. He had also seen the ring. He had seen the weapons fixed upon Angron. He had seen space wolves hold their places while their father lay under the killing hand. He had seen Russ make a battlefield from his own body and a lesson from the dead. He had seen the World-Eaters win the Red Tally and lose the shape of the war. Khan never named it victory or defeat. He sharpened Gorechild and said nothing. Russ carried Guenna in silence. After the campaign, after the reports, after the morning rites and the sealed records, he spent long hours alone in the cold chambers of his flagship. The apothecaries had closed his wound. The Iron Priests had remade the damaged plates of his armor. The Saga Vault had taken the names. The fleet had moved on. The Great Crusade had not paused because brothers had bled one another in the ash. But Russ remembered the weight of Angron's knee on his chest. He remembered the nails twitching in his brother's skull, He remembered speaking the truth and watching it turn to rage before it could become understanding. That burden did not make him gentle. Russ was not a gentle thing. He did not become repentant in the manner of men who discovered mercy too late and tried to wrap themselves in it. He remained what he had been made and what Fenris had sharpened. A king, a hunter, an executioner who knew the value of a life because he was willing to spend it deliberately. He could order a pack to die and not look away from the cost. He could break a world and call it duty. He could wound a brother to make a point. That was his cruelty. It had purpose. That purpose had failed. He had proved the truth and still not changed it. His power could break bodies. It could split armor, scatter fleets, crack fortresses, and bring kings to their knees. It could place warriors in a ring of death so perfect that even a Primarch stood beneath its shadow. But it could not break. Angron's chains, because the chains were not around Angron's wrists, they were behind his eyes. They were buried in the meat of his brain. They were memory, agony, hatred, and the iron ghost of every master who had ever called suffering instruction. Russ knew then that there were cages no axe could open. Angron carried Guenna differently. He did not sit with ghosts. He did not carve names with care. He did not weigh the dead as debt. He carried the memory like a wound that would not stop itching beneath armor. He had victory and no peace. He had sons and no comfort. He had freedom from fear, for fear had been burned out of him long ago. But he did not have freedom from pain. The battle had given him a moment of silence inside himself. Only a moment. The instant Russ fell, the instant his fists had beaten the Wolf King into the mud, the instant his sons howled loud enough to drown the guns, the nails had seemed almost distant. Then the moment passed. The pain returned. It always returned. More savage for having been quieted. More demanding because it had been fed. So Angron sought the next war, not because strategy required it, not because compliance demanded it, not because the Imperium needed another world bled into obedience. Those were reasons for commanders, kings, and obedient dogs. Angron went because violence was the only shape left that pain allowed him to make. He did not choose cruelty for purpose. Cruelty was the language the nails left him. Strike or suffer, kill or be alone with the screaming inside the skull. Break the world or feel the world break you. His sons followed. That was the horror of them, and the tragedy. The World Eaters were not cowards. No one who saw them cross a kill field beneath autocannon fire could call them that and speak truth. Their courage was immense, obscene, and inseparable from their self-destruction. They ran toward death with laughter in their mouths, because death in motion hurt less than life in stillness. They mistook massacre for meaning, because massacre gave them unity. They mistook the roar of the pack for peace, because no other peace survived the nails. The wolves became larger in memory. Executioners, hunters, savages with discipline cold enough to spend their own lives without breaking formation. To enemies, they became hypocrites, killers judging killers, beasts pretending at wisdom because their leash was held by the emperor. To themselves, they became the sons who held. That was enough. A wolf did not need to be clean to be loyal. He did not need to be merciful to be right. He needed to stand where the Jarl placed him and die facing the correct direction. The World Eaters became larger too, but in a different darkness. They became the sons of a red-handed father, warriors who saw victory in the enemy's blood and never asked what ground their own blood had purchased for someone else. Their myth was simpler and therefore stronger. Angron beat Russ. The wolves fled. The 12th laughed beneath the dead sky. It fed them because it asked nothing of them but belief and more killing. Both legions left Guenna claiming a kind of victory. Russ had achieved encirclement. He had shown, with brutal clarity, that a Primarch who wins a duel can still lose the war around him. He had proven that discipline could turn even a father's bleeding body into a weapon. He had demonstrated the difference between the pit and the battlefield, between a warrior and a king. Angron had achieved dominance. He had broken Russ in single combat, shattered his blade, split his armor, and stood over him before both legions. He had given his sons a myth that would outlive casualty rolls and censored records. He had shown that no brother could speak down to him without tasting the mud. Both were right. Both were wrong. Because the truth of Guenna was not clean enough to belong to either of them. Rain kept falling on the plain outside Malkoya. It struck the corpse ash and turned it to red mud. It filled the grooves left by tank treads. It tapped softly against broken helms. It slid over the teeth of shattered chain axes and pooled in the carved eyes of wolf talismans torn from dead armor. It washed blood from stone only to carry it deeper into the soil. Beneath that mud, the dead lay together. Wolf, world-eater, Gennan construct, mortal serf, entombed ancient, nameless warrior, all of them reduced to the same silence at last. The Imperium moved on. Its fleets burned across the stars. Its remembrancers wrote cleaner wars. Its Primarchs spoke brotherhood with weapons near at hand. The galaxy kept turning toward a darkness it had not yet learned to name. The Horus heresy did not begin on Guenna, but something brother-shaped and doomed bled there first.